Fucking hell, I get the name wrong. I mean, what a great start. Let's hope that bit wasn't actually on the stream, eh? And then, so obviously we've really briefly bastardized logic there.
Now it turns out that atheists are in the majority everywhere in the world and always have been. In fact, atheists were in the majority before there were people.
But they've got the lowest average IQ.
And, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
Look at his face.
Hi.
I like the man on the left and the man on the right. Hello, and welcome to the Fresh Air Sci-Fi Show. I'm Joe.
I'm Dave.
I'm Martin.
I'm Chris.
And that's Kevin, in case you don't remember him from last week.
We kind of spoke at the same time, so.
Yes, the issues with live streaming. So, I do apologize to anyone that was listening in just a little while ago. We had a bit of a technical difficulty with stream overruns. I've had no rum tonight, just bourbon and beer. Yes, so we had a little bit of an issue. And had to kill everything and start again, including computer restarts. Everything seems to be running okay now. I hopefully won't jinx that, but yes. So, if you didn't catch what was said in the previous palaver, it was, I know you were expecting this week for me to do the responses to the morality cards, the slideshow that I did a couple of weeks ago. We are not doing that one tonight because there are a couple of people who said they still want to give feedback before the stream comes on. So we're just waiting for them to give that little bit of feedback, and we'll do that in a week or two. So tonight we figured we'd keep in the theme of morality, but we'd add a bit of fun to it. It's nearly Christmas, and we're going to talk about things that we all seem to enjoy. Superheroes. We enjoy conversations about morality and superheroes. So what we're going to be doing is looking through the various lenses of different moral theories at different superheroes. For example, vigilantes. Now, vigilante and vigilante justice, when you think about a vigilante, we think of Batman, at least I do. He's the first one that pops to my head. After him, Arrow. But in fact, in the case of both of them, neither of them are technically superheroes. Although, Chris, throw in that correction that you did just before.
Yeah, there was a bit of a retcon done by DC. I'm not sure if it's in the current universe or whether it was part of their new 52 stuff, where they did actually make Batman a metahuman. So he had some form of above human abilities. But whether they've changed that back again now or not is hard to say, because DC are terrible
I
for
think I
just
remember that
doing that
Batman
every
was the
other
Green
year.
Lantern sometime.
Sorry, what was that?
I said I think I remember that Batman in some instances was one of the green, or even one time I think it was Yellow Lantern Corps. No, it was, yeah, he had access to those special magic strands, or the Green Lantern has, but
Yeah.
there is also other colors or
Yes.
other
Yeah,
type of emotions.
there's quite a few different ones.
And I know that Batman had access to those a few times, so he had superpowers multiple times in the course of his comic series.
Yeah, that's interesting. And if you don't know what a metahuman is, that's someone whose body's somehow got a bit of dark matter in it that's happened to give them superpowers. So, for example, the Flash, there was a particle accelerator explosion that infused a load of people with dark matter and gave them different abilities. For example, the Flash himself. So, with the exception of him being a metahuman, he is, let's just go with him being the standard hero. Now, you can say he's a hero if you want. He does fight for good. So we tend to think of Batman as a hero, but he's also a vigilante. Martin, would you like to cover off what a vigilante is?
Yeah, sure. A vigilante is basically just a citizen who takes the law into their own hands.
Exactly. So there are a number of issues with that. The first one, of course, is that it is illegal to do so. At least as far as I'm concerned, it seems to be within our legal system. I don't know if it is anywhere else around the world. Is it illegal where you are, Kevin?
Well, of course, it's Canada.
And what about where you are, Martine? Is it illegal there as well?
Yeah, it is, but it isn't everywhere around the world.
Can you think of some places off the top of your head where vigilantism isn't illegal?
We're gonna get letters for this, but basically America.
So obviously legality and morality are two different things. There might be a basis for your laws within morality, but there are some things that just are not moral, and there are things that are legal that are actually immoral to be illegal. So if we take the fact that it's illegal out of the equation, vigilante justice. Dave, what's your take on that from a moral perspective?
Well, is it really justice if it depends on how it's happening?
Right, yeah. So, I mean, they can be just, knocking out, tying up, for example, using perhaps acceptable force. And there are other vigilantes that go all the way and kill, don't they? So, if they didn't have to kill, if there was a way of restraining the person, but they chose to kill, we would say that's probably an immoral action.
And pretty unjust.
Yes.
That also touches on somewhat of a grey area when it comes to people like Batman as well. We all know that Batman has the will not kill somebody rule, but he's quite happy to do massive damage, cause internal bleeding, and leave them strung up to a lamppost overnight in the middle of winter, which I would argue is probably just basically fucking murder.
And video games too, it kind of actually does murder people. I mean, it's impossible that you're not dead when you run someone over with your car to die.
Especially the speed that car goes, yeah.
Yeah.
You'd be very lucky not to. I suppose in the comic book world there would be some that manage to survive.
Batman goes by plausible deniability. Plausible deniability logic. If he can suppose that you could survive, he's okay with it.
Yeah, sort of a strenuous moral ground there. Yeah, they're alive when I left them. They should be able to survive if someone comes along. Yeah, no problem. So
on the other hand, we are dealing with super villains here, so maybe killing them to spare the general population from further damage may actually be warranted given the amount of damage those supervillains do.
Yeah, that's something I wanted to touch on a bit in a while as well.
Yeah, so I think you've got a point there, but what about the henchmen? All right, so there's the supervillains. We can touch on that in a second, but the henchmen that get damaged on the way to the supervillain, what about them?
Fuck them, they're enemy combatants.
Were the workers building the Death Star and the Jedi innocent?
Yeah, they are the proletariat.
So, I mean, if you were doing some roofing on someone's house, you got sent there by your company and you're retiling the roof, and they just happened to be a gangster and they got shot to pieces in doing so, is it their fault that they agreed to go along to the gangster's house? Should they have refused that job?
Yeah, but everybody knew who the Empire was.
Yes.
Joe, it's a strange coincidence that we're talking about vigilante justice, because my homework for this week was to read about vigilante violence.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so I was quite happy about that, because I'm just updated on the topic right now. Do you want to hear a bit of what I was reading this week?
Yes, definitely. Tell us.
So we read two authors for this week discussion. One was more of a lefty American, it was a text about mostly the idea that it is okay to be proactive in violence if it's from like a defensive and you're the victim point of view. it was an interesting text, and the author was from a completely different person, which was a libertarian American who defends the idea that there is multiple types of vigilante justice. There's not just one, actually. He divided them in two big ones. The first is when you're trying to stop an injustice happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
For example, you know that the cop is arresting someone that did commit a crime, but the cop is using way too much force. So you want to stop the cop using too much force. You're not trying to change the system. You're not trying to do anything else, but to stop this injustice.
Mm-hmm.
And the second type of vigilante justice, so to speak, is when you try to do something to create a bigger change, a more social change. And of course, when you think about that, there's never a case when superhero try to do the second type. He always do the first. He always fix the current problem, but he never try to do something for the long term.
Yeah, that's interesting. Although, actually, we could say, for example, Arrow, he ends up becoming the mayor and tries to change the system, tries to change the gun laws, but tries to make them balanced so that people can protect themselves, but they don't need to use, AR-15s to do so.
And also, if we look at Arrow as the TV show, he's using a list of corrupt people to go and punish them, even if they aren't necessarily doing a crime at that moment. He is trying to get rid of a corrupt system to incite larger change in the area where he lives.
Yeah, you're right.
So
he attacked it from both ends.
Actually, he is doing the second as well.
Yeah, no, you're definitely right there.
And in the text I was reading, like one of the examples of the second type I was mentioning was like Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King. You know, it's resistance to create permanent change. Your civil disobedience is one of those examples. But the authors also mentioned something like Black Panthers, which are violent people sometimes. And the point was made that it's not the use or not of violence which is problematic, but the fact of is it legitimate or not.
So we could say the same about the riots that have happened in America as well, and things like that. Would you almost regard them as a form of vigilante justice?
I think so, yeah. To some extent, at least.
They're at least trying to change the system from, being unjust, and they're doing it in an incredibly violent way, which obviously that comes under scrutiny from a lot of people. You shouldn't do it that way, but they're the voices of the unheard, and the only way they can be heard is by doing things that are morally questionable.
Also, depending on the location, we can actually argue that the protesters themselves aren't really violent, but reactionary. But I also do think that we should be fairly careful in not lumping social activism into vigilante justice, because that seems to be mixing things up.
Yeah, that's fair. Let's get back on topic then with the heroes. Now, you mentioned the supervillains. So I think you, Martin, said that you thought it was acceptable to kill the supervillain because obviously they are a supervillain, and doing so long term would reduce the harm. So that's almost a utilitarian point of view on killing the supervillain.
This is a point that I wanted to make on what you said, Martin, is that now I know that you disagree with the definition that I'm going to use here, but for the sake of the conversation, the difference between a hero and an anti-hero in comics tends to be that anti-heroes are much more violent and will kill. I know that's not the wider sense, but in superheroes in comics, that tends to be the distinction. I wonder if we could say that heroes are more deontological. They have a rule. The rule is not to kill. Whereas the anti-heroes are more consequentialist. Whereas if I kill this one person, I save 1,000 other people, so therefore it's then justified.
We could even maybe say, rather than deontological, it might be virtue-based. Rather than deontology. But that's an interesting point, bringing up deontology, because under something like Kantianism, it would be immoral for them to kill the supervillain, wouldn't it?
Well, basically the Joker has said oftentimes that Batman and the Joker both exist to kill and battle each other. So in that case, I think Batman would be within Kantianism fairly much justified in saying, by killing the Joker, I'm treating him as an end in himself.
That's a really good way to really twist it and reason through that.
Well, not really the case because what Kant means by treating people like an end in itself is to not instrumentalize human life, to not treat people as objects.
Mhm.
And if you treat a Joker like an obstacle, you do treat him like an object.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, but you're not treating him like an obstacle in that sense. You're doing what he wants with his consent.
yeah, but Kant is also against mercy killing. He's also against euthanasia and stuff like that.
Yeah, but it's not necessarily mercy when you say that it's your life goal to kill each other.
I don't think though that Kant would be okay with someone killing someone else just because they want to. Right?
Oh no, he probably
Also-
would, but I doubt he considered the Joker.
Also, with the personal justification, Joker wants Batman to kill him. That is his end goal, as you say. So if Batman does and uses that as a justification, he's also then made Joker win, which is going to be against Batman's ethos to start with.
Though that's that can say that you cannot use your own body as a means too. So if for Joker it's a means of pleasure to be killed or hurt, well, Batman shouldn't give him that because for Kant that's using yourself as a tool.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, but he's arguably doing the same by even fighting the Joker.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but Batman isn't always right. So
What's your take on it, Dave?
I'm just enjoying listening.
Fair.
I love perverting Kant.
Sorry, Martin.
I love perverting Kant.
to be honest,
Yeah.
the only thing I keep of Kant is the point of not instrumentalizing human lives. I'm not a deontologist myself.
No, I know, but I think that is something good. You shouldn't treat people as means to an end. You shouldn't use people, essentially. I mean, that is a good thing to try and live by. So from a utilitarian point of view, we can say that it would probably be moral to kill a supervillain. From a deontological point of view, especially if it was Kantian ethics, then perhaps we'd say not, unless you really bastardize it like Martin did. What other moral theories? I mean, we could go through a few other consequentialist or deontological ones, but maybe if we take a look at virtue ethics. Now, the whole point of virtue ethics is essentially to look inward at yourself. It's not necessarily action-based. It's your internal behaviors. You are trying to make yourself a Superman, if you will, not having the superpowers, just being the best you can be. So in that instance, what do you think the Batman should do to the Joker? Yes. I'd have a go at Batman should try and teach him the error of his ways and try and teach virtue, but then can virtue be taught, Dave?
I
Certainly
think it
can't
would
to
be
the
better
Joker.
to kill him.
Sorry, you both spoke at the same time there. Chris, what did you say?
I said it certainly can't be taught to the Joker.
No. No, I don't think. He's a bit far too gone. Yes, indeed. So in that sense, would someone who is criminally insane like him, what would be most virtuous? Would it be a mercy killing, or would it be institutionalizing him, or something else?
It could just be that instead of being Batman, he is Bruce Wayne and spend some of his considerable billions on increasing the security of Arkham Asylum so they don't break out every other fucking week.
But then we wouldn't have any comics to read.
We've still got Spider-Man, it's fine.
I mean,
Who is also a vigilante, but doesn't get lumped in with it for some reason.
you also have people that will argue that maybe we need to find what caused the Joker to always want to commit more himself and just try to fix it at the source. But like you said, if we're just talking about crazy criminals, is there really anything to fix?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is the chance where one is too far gone. I take your point, Chris, about how he should probably try and use his considerable wealth to fix Arkham Asylum so that this doesn't happen. However, what is actually better for people who are that insane? Would they not be completely miserable trapped between those four walls? Is it better to give them a mercy killing, or is it better to institutionalize and try and rehabilitate, even though
He's got to go. He's got to die.
Murderer.
Not just as a mercy to the Joker himself, but also as a mercy to society. And the fact that you just don't waste that much wads of cash on a hopeless cause. That's just...
Yeah,
I'm
Martin's up
trying
for
to
killing.
take it. I'm trying to take it as a moral kind of abstract, but I know the specifics of what happens if Batman kills Joker, and it's worse than letting him live. There's a wonderful comic series, I think it's called Black Metal, where Batman does kill the Joker, and Joker has a special version of his toxin that is released when he dies, and it creates a wonderful BDSM fucking Batman called the Batman Who Laughed, who goes around killing the entire fucking multiverse. So Batman should probably let the Joker live, or at least kill him from a distance.
What the actual fuck?
That this will happen, right? But it doesn't. So
Yeah, he doesn't know that it would happen. So I suppose in that instance, if you don't have the knowledge of it happening, perhaps that's what you should do. But if you do have the knowledge of the consequences, then obviously, yes. So you'd almost need Flash to jump in there and wind back time and go, right, you tried it that way. What if what if Superman came along, though? Superman came along to help out Batman and threw the Joker into the sun. Would that work?
God damn it! I know too much about comics. There's also one where Superman kills the Joker, and that's where the fucking Injustice games comes from, where Superman goes evil because he starts thinking that maybe we should just kill the really bad ones, and it turns into a worldwide regime.
So does he enjoy killing? Does he find that he enjoys killing? Is that what it is?
I can't remember that much specifics, but I mean, he certainly doesn't seem to not enjoy it. He gets a bit fucking carried away.
You just mentioned a regime, right? You said there was a world tyranny, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
Isn't that interesting that superheroes and comics, anyway, never do anything political except if it's tyrannical?
That's not exactly true.
Well, we mentioned Green Arrow, but I mean the one with superpowers. Of course, Green Arrow or Wayne,
because he's human,
political as regular rich people can do. But I mean, why isn't it more common that people like Superman do it, where they have superpowers that will, when we think about it, give them a lot of political influence from the get-go, right?
Yeah, interesting.
I mean, cool.
Maybe that is their personal ethical standard as well, though. That because they feel they're well, at least the ones that are not of this world, the aliens, they might not get involved with that sort of thing.
He does get involved as a regular human. His alter ego is involved in human affairs like nothing else, like he is an alien. So it's kind of a double standard of some superheroes to say, "Oh, I can act as anyone else when I'm not in my superhero mode, but when I am, I cannot involve myself like the peasants." I mean, take someone like I don't know, Wonder Woman. Why is some superheroes say that you have a code of ethics that ethics that say, "Oh, I cannot get involved in politics, but I can kick the shit of every corrupt being in the country, and that's fine," right?
Yeah, it's a good point. I don't have an answer for that. I don't have an answer.
You decide which people are too corrupt or a tolerable level of corruption, right? What is the line for some of those villains? Because sometimes we think it's obvious because comics tend to be very simple and which baddies trying to portray, but not always, but often. So when you get someone more nuanced, someone that is bad, but not to the point of sending Superman to them bad, no? What do you do? Do you send a lesser superhero? What do you do with those?
Chris, have you got an answer for that one?
I mean, thinking about the part of why they don't, or the superheroes don't go on to try and make be politicians and the like. From a purely mechanical aspect, I imagine it's because the writers want them to be somebody that the readers can relate to. And a reader is more likely to relate to a student or a journalist or a photographer than they are to relate to a politician or the mayor of New York.
And I suppose going on with that, they're more inclined to, at least the average person who reads a comic might be a little bit more, what's the word? Not necessarily in the in group. You think about Spider-Man, he's not one of the jocks, is he? He's a little bit more of a fringe case. So you'd find the people who are at least historically interested in that sort of thing really identify with these people who come from a lesser into a greater.
It's appealing to somebody's power fantasy, essentially, isn't it? I can see myself in that role, and therefore I can see myself being that superhero, but I can't see myself being president of the world.
I can.
I was going to say, actually, I can, but that's narcissism and arrogance more than anything else.
From a writing perspective, but I mean, I think there is also a mechanical reason that means that you can do it. Because if you were a superhero with superpowers, it wouldn't be fair to go into politics because you'd just be too powerful. Not only will people get intimidated enough or people will be so much in awe towards you that they will just vote for you. Well,
I suppose it depends on what your superpowers are. If we were to put somebody like Charles Xavier...
Superman is loved by the people. Even if he run a no platform, people would just vote for him anyway. Just because he's loved so much. Because he saved lives countless times and people know him. And just because of that recognizability and charisma, he will get the votes. That's how a lot of politicians win sometimes. They're not very good when it comes to policies, but they're liked. So people vote for them.
For politics corrupts.
Yeah,
seems more simple and more to the point.
Yeah, politics corrupts. I mean, that is a fair point. Yeah, I mean, imagine a particular superhero going into it, and yeah. But Chris, you were making a point about Charles Xavier. I mean, obviously with his telepathic ability.
Yeah, exactly. But just on that last point as well. If we look at somebody like Superman, then they probably would get elected because of their popularity. But not every superhero is Superman. For every Superman, you've got 200 Elastic Mans.
And
Elastic Man isn't going to get elected on his popularity because everybody thinks he's a fucking joke.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it also depends on their superpowers, which is where I was going with Charles Xavier. If you had a telepath or a psychic running, then that would probably lead to some pretty easy corruption. It's like, well, I'll just boop them into wanting to vote for me. It doesn't matter what my policies are. I can just get on the radio and blanket get the vote. But if it was somebody, again, like Elastic Man, his powers aren't going to lend themselves to anything political. Essentially, he can reach something on a higher shelf without a stepladder.
No, he can get...
I am mocking him, but he's Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic, without the smarts. So would it be particularly wrong for somebody like that to try and get into politics? I don't think so. I don't think it would give them any more of an advantage or a leg up on their competition.
No, it probably wouldn't. I mean, it depends on the particular parameters around it. If he had done enough saving of people and he did build up the love, maybe that in a similar way to Superman. But yeah, in general, I think you're probably right.
That Spurios, like I said, only go into politics when when he becomes supervillains.
Yep.
Because it kind of sends the message that politics is for losers, you know.
I mean, looking at the political systems around, well, at least in America and the UK, I'd say you're probably right.
Comics do, comics do have some morals and ethics and views of the world, right? Even if the writers try to dumb it down or try to hide it a bit, they do have some leanings, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like Chris was saying, the difference between a hero and an anti-hero. The hero is probably far more virtuous than an anti-hero. The anti-hero is doing the good, but not necessarily virtuously. They might be more prone to doing violent things, or they're just doing the good thing because, they like solving puzzles rather than wanting to actually saving someone. That's one of your points, isn't it, Martin, about Sherlock Holmes? He could technically be regarded as an anti-hero, not necessarily in the comic book sense that Chris is thinking about, with the more violent style heroes like Wolverine or Deadpool, for example.
So you'd say that an anti-hero is defined by his motivation?
I think that there's
the definitions that I found online is basically that the anti-hero is someone who does something good regardless of having a fucked up moral compass.
Yeah, and they're more willing to do things that you wouldn't expect a hero to do. So, for example, the extreme violence. So a normal hero would try and subdue someone, whereas the anti-hero would go, fuck it, I'm cutting your head off. I've saved that person and I've killed you. I don't really care about saving that person, but, I've saved them. Yay, look at me.
It's also quite worrying how much people raise up the anti-heroes and put them on a pedestal. The one that is a particular point for me, that is just fucking scary, is the number of police who go after the Punisher and raise him up on a pedestal. It's like, that's not the dude that you should be idolizing.
But couldn't it just be what you said earlier? As a power
Ask
fantasy?
no questions ever.
Sorry, what were you saying, Kevin?
I said, couldn't it just be what you said earlier, that is a power fantasy? Because even if they are cops, sometimes they do feel powerless, like everyone else. So maybe it is a way for them to, vent out their frustration toward the system, like everyone else. Just in their own way.
Yeah, so as an ex-cop going rogue and doing the things that they can't do because they are tied by the system, and he's getting the results that they wish that they could have but can't because of the system. I suppose that could be why he is idolized by them. That does make a lot of sense.
They actually addressed it in a Punisher comic not too long ago as well, that the Punisher met up with some cops and they were saying about how much they idolized him and getting a selfie with him, and the boys down at the yard aren't going to believe it. And he's like, if you do what I do, I'm coming for you next. I am not what you're supposed to be. You're supposed to be fucking better.
Yeah.
And the fact that they actually addressed that in a comic, I thought was really fucking cool.
Yeah, definitely. Well, there you go. There's your point proven right there. They do happen to address things like ethics within comic books themselves, and they've just done it right there, saying you shouldn't be like this. I'm just doing it because I have to.
But yeah, Kevin, your point about that being a power fantasy was good. I hadn't thought about it from that perspective for the cops.
You just said that they do address some social issues, but well, wasn't there a few controversies over the last few years because sometime a writer will add something that is very reminiscent of something happening right now in politics, and people just don't like it because they don't like the government of the present, I guess. Like, I know there was a few controversies about like social justice, especially like
Comic Gate.
yeah.
Oh, what's that, Dave? I don't think I heard that.
Comic Gate. It's a bunch of whiny, self-entitled white people complaining about politics and social justice being in comics.
But they always were in comics. It's just they didn't notice before, I guess.
Yeah, basically.
Like the people complaining about rage.
Yeah, it's sort of what you were saying earlier about power fantasies and the people reading the comics seeing themselves in those heroes. That's the very shallow way that they were reading the comics, so they didn't notice any of the actual political stuff.
And things like people being up in arms because the X-Men comics had a gay wedding in it a few years back. And they're like, you can't bring that shit into the X-Men. It's like, do you not realize that the X-Men have always been an analogy for that? That was the fucking point.
I'm gay, and that's what I read into when I was reading some comics about the X-Men. When I watched the movies, it was the same thing for me. I mean, it's obviously an analogy for coming out. It's pretty obvious.
It always has been. It's been the point behind the entire series. And then they show one gay kiss or wedding, and people lose their fucking minds. It's like, have you not been paying attention to the thing that you apparently really fucking like?
Well, obviously not.
Yeah, I think most people tend not to. And I suppose if they're in that incredibly macho straight way, they wouldn't have seen that because they wouldn't have been looking for it. They'd have been reading it from their perspective, and chances are they weren't looking into things that deeply. I mean, to be fair, I mean, look at the Matrix. I think we all missed the fact that it was a trans allegory, weren't we?
Yeah, I missed that, and
It
that
was
feels
quite
weird now.
subtle, I think.
It was definitely subtle. I mean, there were the things like, taking the pill and, transforming, becoming your new self and all that sort of thing. And I don't think people even started considering it until both the Wachowskis came out as trans.
Yeah, well, it's basically the same as The Good Place, right? I mean, you can watch it as just a funny sitcom, then you can watch it as a funny sitcom with some philosophy in it, and then you can watch it as a funny sitcom with some philosophy in it, which is based on Sartre's play.
Yeah, I mean, The Good Place is really good. I enjoy it, but people not seeing the ethical themes must be blind because they are so obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you watch The Good Place and don't notice the philosophy, I
You have
just
to
don't
believe
know
it.
how to help you. There's
mean,
nothing we can do for you. I'm
They explicitly
sorry.
refer to philosophers and that show. I mean, come on.
Yeah. Obviously, I mean, there is definitely the whole philosophical take on it, but I think there's some people who might look at it in a more surface style. They might not look deep into it, and they might not pick up on things like the trolley problem that was played out in it. If you're not aware of the trolley problem, you'll just be going, oh, they're just trying to demonstrate what's good and bad. They might not actually go, oh, that's a live trolley problem, how cool is that? They might not get excited about it in the same way that someone who enjoys philosophy or at least philosophical memes.
Yeah, it's often played out as a meme, but to be honest, it's a serious thought experiment,
Yes, yeah. I mean, we actually did a couple of episodes on various thought experiments, and we did one on the trolley problem. Although I did misorder the trolleys that I had on the slideshow, which was great.
Yeah, and superheroes will ruin the trolley problem because you can just save everyone fast enough that you don't even have to choose.
No, that's true. I mean, if you're the Flash, you definitely could. Although if you're someone like Mr. Fantastic, probably can't get there in time. I don't know if he'd be able to stretch
Well-
out fast enough and save
He
everyone.
could really do something, but he'd have to be creative about it.
Yeah.
Wrap himself around the wheels of the trolley, to be
Yeah.
fair.
Yeah, but only if he had time to get there. I don't know how fast he can move from the lever to the wheels. So, so I think, I mean, we've sort of covered across, how vigilantes may or may not do things in the right way. There are, depending on how they act, depending on how much force they use, if they use reasonable force, then you could say that their behavior was a moral one. But if they are excessive, it's probably fair to say that they are being immoral to do so. Would you say that even though their action is immoral, it resulted in a better outcome, so it might be morally permissible, even though it's not necessarily moral?
Well, it doesn't always result in better outcomes.
No, but let's just say, for example, in one that it does, they've killed someone and saved 5 people. Oh, what does that sound like?
Are we thinking of a hypothetical, like, is it better for Batman to go and take out Mr. Freeze, even if it's immoral, than for a squadron of police to try and some of them get killed in the process? Yeah?
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. That's better than what I had in my head, so go with it.
I mean, I would find it hard to argue that it's worse for Batman to do it in that situation.
Yeah.
But if any of the rest of you have got a argument for it,
I mean, I think the thing we didn't talk about is the villain's motivations in comics books is always very flimsy. Because in
not
real
always.
life, criminals have rather logically sound reason. Even if it doesn't, if it only makes sense to them, it makes sense to someone, right? But when
I
you get
mean,
the
I'll
motivation
raise
like I want
Magneto.
world domination, it doesn't make sense for anyone, even the person concerned. It's just irrational to its core. Like, what do you gain from world domination? Like,
It depends on the supervillain. Somebody like
Yeah.
Magneto, I would argue, is an incredibly well-written supervillain.
yeah, there
And
are
although
exceptions.
he is after world domination, it's for a specific purpose. And he has a very sympathetic, not approach, but a sympathetic position for a supervillain. If we're talking about somebody like the Joker, whose only thought is, I want to see as much carnage as possible, then yeah, sure, flimsy. But then
Because-
again, we've also got people like Mr. Freeze,
Because
and
they
the
use
only thing
force.
he's doing is trying to heal and cure his wife.
Because the use of force has to be proportionate to the crime committed and what circumstance, right? And what context. If someone is sick in his head and is committing like involuntarily a crime, you don't want to kill them. You don't want to hurt them more than you did because it's not really their fault. In real life, that's what we do. We try to help those people rather than hurt them. But if someone is doing so intently, we do use more force usually. So that
Yeah.
does make a difference.
So I'm going to condemn vigilantism outright and simply cite for that the rule of law.
Okay. Now, as someone who generally doesn't respect the law, Martin, that seems a bit strange from you.
It's the rule of law, not the law itself. The rule of law is a bigger complex of basically the social order in which you live, which you jeopardize by disrespecting any kind of authority and every kind of underpinning that we have in our societies.
Fair. What's your take on it, Dave?
What? Sorry?
your summation of vigilantism and the type of force used, can it be a case where even if they are excessive with the force that they're using, it could still be morally permissible?
No.
No.
Because it's not justice. If they're going out in the name of justice and they're doing unjust things, then they're defeating their own purpose.
Fair. That's a good point. Well, before we move on to past vigilantes, is there any more comments on vigilantism? No, is the answer to that one.
Yeah, not on vigilantism itself. I am just slightly curious why we immediately attach that label to people like Batman and Arrow and Punisher, whereas we don't immediately label people like Spider-Man and Iron Man as that, even though they're doing the same thing. I think it's just the bright colours.
Yeah,
I
they're
don't,
camper.
but-
That's what it is, you know.
Yeah.
And as we know, all camp people are heroes. No, you could be right there. I think when there's superpowers involved, I think when there's when there's superpowers involved, it almost puts it in a different ballpark, doesn't it? Because they become a superhero or a supervillain. But when we're talking about the standard heroes, they're not doing it within the realms of the law. But you look at Batman, he uses excessive force. You look at Arrow, he outright kills people. Less so now, but especially at the start, he was just killing people left, right, and center.
I think I know why Spider-Man is on a vigilante though.
Oh yeah,
It's pretty simple. If you remember, usually the city and the offshore local government is okay with him doing his job. Nobody is
No,
opposed.
they're not.
Not always, but sometimes people are okay with some superheroes. That's what I'm trying to say. Sometimes you have the assent of the community, which makes it sort of more legitimate. While
That's
Batman,
the community being okay with it, not the authorities being okay with it.
I mean,
yeah.
I'm not a big comic reader, so I don't know, but I do know that there are some cases where people do find it legitimate when a lot of people don't think that vigilantes we name are legitimate.
Although that going against that, Batman's generally liked by the community, isn't he? Generally, and to even an extent, after a while, the police don't have as much of an issue with him after a while, anyway. So, does he suddenly stop becoming a vigilante because they turn a blind eye? I think your point actually there is spot on, Chris. They technically are vigilantes. We just don't see them that way. We don't perceive them that way. So is vigilantism actually just a perception, or is it our perception that stops them being regarded as vigilantes in our eyes?
Here's a question.
No.
Daredevil. Is Daredevil a vigilante or a superhero?
Vigilante.
He's both.
Yes. Okay, so vigilantes work at night and superheroes work during the day. Big get.
Yeah, I don't think
Although, for Daredevil,
Arrow-
isn't it always night?
Exactly, and you just said that he's a vigilante.
Yeah.
Batman, vigilante, night. Arrow, vigilante, night. Punisher, vigilante, night. Spider-Man, superhero, daytime. Superman, superhero, daytime. I've fixed it. It's done.
Superman works for the press. Spider-Man works for the press. That's the difference.
shit.
You
Just
guys are
touch me,
killing me.
Dave. God damn it. I have a system, man.
That's what I'm here for.
So what about Iron Man, though? He owns a tech
Yeah.
company. He's got a legitimate business.
Iron Man is comparable to Batman, but he's not called a vigilante when you think about it.
No, that was.
Then we're
Chris's
back
point.
to the bright colours.
Yes.
I think I know. I think I know what the difference is now. I think I started to see a few threads. Like it doesn't work for Spider-Man, but I think it works when you compare Batman and Iron Man. Iron Man is he's open about the fact that he's saving people. I mean, people know who Iron Man is.
That's true.
Yeah.
Everyone knows it's Tony Stark, but Batman is keeping his identity secret, which people think it's not legitimate, not as much at least. Even if people like Batman, people do think that it's people don't always like that he's hiding his identity. And a lot of people respect Tony Stark for being upfront about it.
Yeah, and again,
This
we're
is
back
where
to the
we get
Force
into a-
as well. I think as well. If you, the level of Force, so if we consider that one, the level of Force that a certain one might be using, does that actually throw in a spanner? So someone like Iron Man, someone like Superman tend not to use excessive force, and again, they're regarded as heroes. I think technically they all
Iron
should.
Man will straight up kill a bitch.
Did
Iron
he?
Man has no problem killing people.
Does he not? Hey, Lord Brian, nice to see you.
Yeah, I remember asking people, right? I think so.
Oh,
Also, vigilantism is simply a legal term. We can talk about justified or unjustified violence, but vigilantism is a legal term which simply means operating outside of the law to acquire justice.
yeah. So technically, they
Yeah,
are all
that's why I
vigilantes.
asked.
So
Yeah,
That's
they
why
are
I asked,
unless they
why
are
do they apply
deputized
it?
or in any way legitimized by a legitimate government.
yeah, I mean, so realistically speaking, they are all vigilantes. It's just our perception on them being heroes or vigilantes.
I guess a good example of someone that cannot be a vigilante because of your definition would be the Green Lantern Corps, right? You're like a legitimate force in the galaxy that is legal, right? They are approved by the intergalactic government or something, right?
Yeah, no, that's a very interesting point. Actually, you could argue that Earth might not see their authority and therefore not feel that they could still regard them as a vigilante because they're not working within the parameters of our law.
Is that an allegory for interventionism? When you think about it, isn't that an allegory for that?
I just wanted to touch back quickly as well on your point before, Kevin, of people who mask their identities and people who are open about their identities as superheroes. People should, if they're interested in comics at all, pick up the Marvel run of Civil War, which is about exactly that. The film completely butchers it. Tries to do a good job of it, but I mean, it's a film. The comics are completely about whether they should register and all put down who they are so that they've got that kind of personal responsibility and legal responsibility, and the others who go against that, who think that it's necessary for them to be able to act outside of the law.
That's a very
Not
fair
that
point.
answers anything, but there's a really good comic series about precisely what you brought up.
I think maybe we need to have a little read of that one. So we should probably move on, though. We've spoken about vigilantes for a little while. Next one is brief before we move on to the big one, and it is about consent. So if someone gets saved without consenting to being saved, technically, is that an immoral action? What if they didn't want to be saved? What if they've gone out looking to get mugged and killed? What if they're throwing themselves off a building because they want to die and Superman, Batman, whoever swoops in and saves them? Is that an immoral action?
I'm so ready for this question because one of the first things you study in philosophy of especially political philosophy, is the question of consent. And most authors have a varying definition of consent, but usually there's always a way for consent to be assumed in a way that is legitimate. For example, if you take, I think, is it Rousseau or Hobbes? I forget which one. You can conceive the idea that consent, when you cannot be sure, because, for example, there's an emergency, you're talking about a child, or you're talking about someone that cannot speak, for whatever reason.
So a child falls into a pool, you jump in and save them. Like technically, that's assumed consent.
Yeah, but the reason you assume consent is for those authors is if you consider the average intellectually sound person, what is the thing that people will agree is good to do? Right? What would the average person want? And the average person doesn't want to die, so
they want good things to happen. Yeah, they want good things to happen to them.
Yeah, And realistically speaking, in that situation, you could even say that, okay, it's a cry for help. Maybe the superhero could give them something worth living for example, for someone jumping off the building or getting into it.
That's what we do.
Yeah. Martin, what were you going to say?
Well, we basically answered that. But let me pose this: suppose Batman or Superman saves someone who's jumping from a skyscraper, and as soon as they get back onto the skyscraper, that person said, "Fuck you! I really wanted to die." Does Batman or Superman have the obligation to push them or to let them fall down in any way?
Well, no, that's interesting, isn't it? Because they wouldn't necessarily want them to die. I suppose in that situation, they try and talk them out of it. You're right.
Can I
though.
alter that a little bit?
Go on then.
So I would say that in that specific situation, it would be wrong for them to push them. But let's say somebody's jumped off a building, Superman's flown in and saved them and put them down on the floor at street level, and they say, "No, Superman, fuck you, I wanted to die." Should Superman then take them back up to the top so that they can try again? So they're not actively pushing them and killing them, but they are resetting it back to where it was before for that person to then make the choice.
I think they should just let them do it again if they want to, but not bring them back on.
Not
I mean,
exist.
meet them and climb the tower again if they want to.
Yeah. So
What about pushing the button for the lift?
Can they not push the button themselves?
They broke all their fingers on the way down by being caught. Come on, Superman, stop being a dick.
That is a good point, though. There's a lot of things where obviously you see in the movies where they're moving so fast that Superman doesn't match the speed and just outright catches people, and the force alone should have killed the person or at least broken a few bones in doing so. So I can't remember what I was watching, but they addressed the harm superheroes can do when they're saving the public, and there's all these court cases about it. I mean, should superheroes who do harm to innocents within it actually have to do something for these people, maybe pay them off in some way?
Yes. That's vigilanteism.
Right. So what if they are legally sanctioned? Forget them being vigilantes. Let's just say they're a legally sanctioned superhero that goes out and does good, but in the process they do enough damage to people. Do they still have to reimburse them for any damages?
Typically, yes, but in America, no, because apparently you can shoot somebody in the back 8 times without even going to jail.
I think it depends if you consider it a negligence, like in real life, right? If your doctor fails to save your child, sometimes it can be considered negligence, and sometimes it's just life, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, but that's slightly different. If your doctor saves your child and also punches you in the throat at the same time.
What I'm trying to say was the superhero able to save you any other way? If it was the only way, then I don't think you can fault him for doing the only way, even if it hurts you a bit.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, that's going back onto the whole excessive force thing with the vigilantes, for example. If they could have restrained the villain instead of killing them or using excessive force, then that's what they should do. And I suppose it's the same sort of thing. If the hero happened to rush it and cause damage that was unnecessary, then there's definitely a case there. But if it's the only way to save a life, then
do have a real world equivalence to this as well. Look at when the fire brigade are called out to a road traffic accident. If they take the jaws of life and cut the roof off of your car before trying the handle, then they're probably at fault. If they could have just opened the fucking door. But if they've tried the door and they need to cut it off, then sorry, that was a necessary thing to happen. They have caused damage outside of it, but tough shit.
That's a good example. How many times superheroes just break stuff to help people and just don't try the common sense solution first. Like they break the wall before trying the door, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we assume that that's acceptable just because generally when you're watching it, it's a fast-paced action thing. You're like, yeah, that's really cool. But if you take a step back and you go, hang on, did you really need to do that? Did you really need to behave that way? And that's when you sort of start considering these things. So those examples that you just gave are really good. So being saved without consent, what is people's, I know we went through implied consent, but as you said, should you allow the person who decides they want to kill themselves, allow them to go back up the building and do so, or should you try and convince them not to? What is the best course of action in that sort of thing for the superhero to do?
But here you're stepping into the debate about suicide and maybe even euthanasia, which is an entirely not unrelated but separate issue, because while there are questions of consent about suicide and euthanasia, the debate goes much further than that, which I think is why it's not an easy answer, because you have to basically state your position about both those issues right now if you want to answer this question, which is why I think it's not an easy answer.
That's a fair point.
Also, Joe, since we are now on the topic of suicide, we should probably add in the phone number for a suicide hotline.
Yes, that's true. There's many around the world, wherever you are. Go on to Google and find one.
And by the way, you can always get one if you call your phone general operator. I don't know what number it is for your country, but when you call to ask for a number, you can always do that for suicide numbers too. Suicide help number.
Yeah. I mean, on the old landlines, didn't that used to be 100? You used to dial 100 to get a thing, or was it just I don't even know if that still works on mobile phones now. In fact, do you remember you used to dial 123 and get someone to tell you the time? Showing my age there, blow me. And these days you just go, oh, there's the time, it's everywhere. And we have no time. So yes, we will put in some things. We're not actually suggesting anyone should commit suicide. We're just trying to address the point of, if it is someone's wish to do so, should they be allowed to do so? I would always hope personally that we would do everything that we can to help someone in that situation. But we're getting very, very serious for a fun stream that is supposed to be about superheroes and superhero morality. So we're going to move on from here. I hope you don't mind us skirting around the issue. We might address it in a future stream. So the big one for the night, and there's a couple of other little bits I'd like to discuss. Well, that was terrible. God.
The Thanos Snap, right?
Yeah. Apparently I haven't clicked my fingers in ages. I've got really sweaty hands right at the moment. Sorry. The Thanos Snap, which apparently I can't do. See, I'd be useless. Could you imagine at the end of the movie and I was Iron Man? I'd just... Sorry if that was a spoiler. And I'd go, I can't do it. So, the Thanos Snap. So the reason for Thanos doing the snap was that he thought it would be best for the universe. That's the short version of it. Chris, do you want to explain it in more detail?
No. Sorry. The idea that Thanos essentially has is that everywhere has grown beyond the resources' ability to keep up with it. There is starvation, there's slavery, there's all kinds of imbalances throughout the universe as a whole. And his idea is that if the number of people, as it were, was halved, then we would be able to live within our means better. There would be more resources for fewer people, and therefore we would prosper more as sentient creatures.
So from looking at the perspective of flourishing, if what he says is true, you could make a case for this being a moral action under certain moral theories, at least. Now, my
I
gut
think
reaction.
Whatever theory you take.
Sorry?
I think it's stupid, whatever theory you take, to be honest.
Well, it depends. I think that realistically, there's always other options, and I think that's the bit that he hasn't tried other things first. He's instantly gone for mass murder.
My issue is, even if you did the snap, what is stopping the world from getting overpopulated again? It will just happen later,
My
right?
big issue with it.
Yeah, that is
And
the
are you
biggest
just
issue.
going to snap the universe every 10,000 years or so? It's dumb.
Yeah,
You
you're
need more
not dealing with it at
solution.
the root of the problem, are you? You're basically putting a band-aid over it for right now. We're sorted, and as you say, every 10,000 years or so, you're going to need to do that again. And that is a hell of a lot of death. Half the universe every 10,000 years. That is a hell of a lot, especially in that universe. We're not talking about just what we're aware of. That is a lot of the universe.
So how far into spoilers are we going to go with this?
I think
I think
anybody...
we left that behind.
Sorry?
I think we've already left spoilers behind.
Yes, definitely.
You can spoil everything.
Yeah, the thing is that if we look at it in that way, where it would have to be done every 10,000 years, at the beginning of Endgame, Thanos snaps the Infinity Gems away. So he does what he considers moral good thing, which will work for a little while, but then stops it from being possible in the future.
Which is even dumb.
So he's actually made a point of making sure that the fix can't be done again when it's necessary.
The stupidity seems to be the bad guy here.
Yeah.
That's the point, though. Because he's misguided, because he naively thinks this is the right thing to do. There is a point to be made in moral philosophy that he doesn't have wrong intention. He's not doing evil. He's just being dumb.
Yeah.
And dumb,
Yes,
dumb
with sure.
Yeah.
To be dumb is not to be evil.
No. So yeah, he's bad. He's doing a bad action, but he's not necessarily evil in that particular action. He's doing it because he thinks it's the benefit. And obviously, if we're thinking from subjectivism, technically what he's doing is perfectly moral because that's his opinion of what the right thing to do is. So we could say from that point of view, if you are a subjectivist, you have to agree that that was the truth maker from his perspective. As you've mentioned, though, yeah, he actually prevents it from happening again. So not only has he only put a band-aid over the problem, he hasn't actually done anything to solve the problem on a larger scale. He hasn't told people, right, what you need to do is look after your resources and stop overbreeding here and move over to this bit and that sort of thing. He's just gone, I'm going to go have more retirement now.
A modern Thanos snap, we have a recent Thanos snap. It's a dumb example, but it does work. He recently, Pornhub decided to snap every video from unverified user, which is more than, I think, 3/4 of the videos. It's like a lot of it.
Yeah.
And the reason he gave is to fight child pornography, but the real reason, we'll be honest, is because a credit card company threatened to just cut funding, and he decided, oh fuck, we have to find some. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to swear. We had to fix it fast because if we don't, we just lose our revenue. So he just found the fastest solution instead of the more sustainable, right?
Yeah.
Here's a difference though. The whole point of eliminating half the universe isn't even a solution. I mean, if we look, for instance, which is the basis for all of these stories, the way we live here on Earth, we have only reason to assume that the rich would get richer and the poor would get even poorer somehow by the fact that the guy snapped his fingers.
Yeah, unless somehow all the rich people got killed in the snap, which was completely random, so chances are that wouldn't have happened, although if it is completely random, it could have. Sorry?
And in which case, I would also snap my fingers.
Even if you just snap the bad people or just rich people, it wouldn't change the world, because if you did get rid of every rich person, then because the fact that being rich is relative, there will just be new rich people that will appear. That's just how it works.
That's true. And also, you know, their money would be passed on to other people. You're not getting rid of their money, are you? You know, so you get rid of all the people who are rich in that particular family, and you go, okay, well, actually, we found this person that's the third cousin of so-and-so, so you're the closest relative, and oh, look, there's a new rich person anyway. So no matter which way you do it, you know, as you say, it's a relative thing, but it's also a relative thing.
Something I'd like to raise as well is I think discussions about this tend to get bogged down on whether it would work. And I don't think that that's the point of a morality-based discussion about it. Assume that it did work. Is it moral? That's, I think, the important point, because we can nitpick whatever various reasons or whatever he could have done instead. But
Yeah, I
if
agree,
he did
because
that and it worked,
I
is
agree
it
with
moral?
your point, because, for example, to give you an example to show your point, is if you could convert gay people to straight people, would it be moral to do so? And of course, most people will answer, no, it's not. Because it's not a question of if you can do it or not, but if you should.
Yeah, exactly. So we have to examine this as Thanos has done the snap and it will do what he intends it to do. So what are the consequences of that? So half the people have lost their loved ones. So, okay, there is enough resources, but there's a fuck more sadness and depression in the world, in the universe. There's loss, there's all of this kind of stuff. Can we consider the future prosperity over the time frame to adapt to be a worthwhile thing for that cost? And I don't think we can.
I think you've got a good point there. I mean, if you take a utilitarian point of view, where you're sort of the initial consequence, you'd go, oh, actually, yeah, fair enough. That's work, so therefore it is moral. But then, as you say, you consider all the emotions, all the heartache, all the loss, and all of that. You could then argue that, well, actually, no, it's not. But then you've got the additional bit of, but it does work, and they will get over it, and they will eventually stop being sad, and eventually people will prosper and be happy, and there will be
100 years' time.
Yeah,
fine. But
yeah.
now, fuck off.
So
I mean,
it depends how
I
long
think
you
that's-
want your consequences to be dragged on. You know, the very short term, and it works. Okay, yes, it's moral. A little bit longer when you're dealing with all the loss. No, and then even further in the future, technically, yes, it does become moral again under that sort of system.
I can tell you straight up, though, that I don't think most utilitarians would think this is a good action under any circumstance. Like, my personal favorite utilitarian is John Stuart Mill, and it's pretty obvious he wouldn't be okay with that.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I'm just saying, how far down the line would you consider it? And I think you're right. I think in general, even under a really, really stretched version of utilitarianism, generally people would not consider this action moral. I think if you go something with like Kantian ethics, obviously killing's wrong, so it's not moral. Straight up, it's easy. There you go. You can't do it.
And virtue ethics will say that if you take, for example, maybe Aristotelian virtue ethics, he will say it's not moderation. It's way overboard. It's way too extreme. And the virtue of Aristotle is to be moderate, to be forgot the word in English. Is not moderate the right word? Temperance. It's not the right word I wanted to try. I use another one in French. That's why, but never mind.
Maybe even prudence.
All five of us then agree, without being contrarian at least, that this would be immoral. Yes?
Yeah.
Yes, I think so. I think I can see arguments for it being moral. I just don't necessarily agree with them. But I think they have to be.
Then I want to take this to the next step then, because this isn't Thanos' end plan. When we look at Endgame, that is Thanos' original plan. in Endgame, when the Avengers have pissed him off enough, he realizes that he's going to end up with a universe full of people who aren't grateful for what he's done. So his plan is then to destroy this universe and make a new universe where there is enough for everyone. Everyone will be grateful. Everyone will be happy forever. Is that moral?
Okay,
Because there's no suffering.
before we go there, I
Everyone gone.
do want to take issue with something said not too long ago, which is the idea that we shouldn't focus too much on whether or not something works. Because one of the things that morality and ethics is concerned with is picking the right course of action. And the right course of action most certainly is dependent on whether or not something we assume to do uh, does or does not work.
Yeah, I think what Chris was saying is that we shouldn't debate whether it will work or not. What we should do is just assume it would for the sake of the conversation. If we're going through the course of actions with Thanos' snap and then him sending the gems away, he's assumed that it's worked. It's going to be there. There you go. That's our result. And we're going to assume for the sake of the conversation that it did work. Is it moral or not? But you're right. You know,
we only assume that it will work, but only for a short time, which is not the same thing, right?
yeah, definitely. I mean, but that's when we're getting into the nuance. And as you say, for morality, that is one of the things that you actually have to do, and you have to consider all of these things. I think that the problem is that we could sit here debating for hour upon hour about all the problems with it. And I think you raised the perfect objection to it right at the start, is the fact that, you know, he would have to do it again in 10,000 years, and he snaps them away, so he couldn't do it in 10,000 years. So the answer is it wouldn't have worked anyway. But we were assuming, for the sake of the conversation, that was all the universe needed for it to actually work. So we went on with that.
Also, isn't that a bit
given its best possible option, is it moral? It's definitely not considering worse outcomes, but given its best possible outcome, is it even moral then? That's where I was trying to get to, and it's still not.
Yeah. So even with the best possible outcome, it's not moral. So, and I think we were all in agreement with that sort of thing. So your objection was right, but I think that's where the whole conversation lied with it. But Chris's next point about creating an entire new universe, like basically destroying this one to create a new one where everybody was happy, there was no suffering and all of that. Oh, that's almost like the experience machine, but not.
I struggle with this one because on a gut level, I really want to say it's wrong. I really, really want to say it's wrong. And I can't logically figure out a reason why it is.
Well, it's the amount of death in the first place. I think that's the first thing, actually wiping out the entire universe.
Immediately replaced with just as much life. And all of that life doesn't suffer anymore.
Is it the same life?
You're just getting rid of suffering.
Yeah.
Does it matter if it's the same life? That's the problem. Logically, it doesn't.
Well,
emotionally, it really, really does. And I can hate it. But
I can provide an argument from a Stoician perspective and saying that someone like Thanos just need to accept something as they are instead of trying to fix the universe itself.
Yeah.
Well, at the point where you decide to make a new universe, you are deciding to sacrifice life that has already been actualized in favor for hypothetical life. So that would basically be killing your toddler, just so that you have the means to raise a baby that you may have in the future.
Yeah, or even if you will have in the future. That's it. You've only, that's a very good and on the nose and quite gut wrenching in a way analogy. If you could kill your favorite child so that you could raise a new one, and I have to put that in there because I'm sure everybody out there's got one child that they're like, yeah, that one. But yeah, so if you wanted to have a baby, you wanted that experience over again, but the only way you could do that was actually by killing the one that you've got to get those resources. I think that's a fair analogy. It is different. It is different because you're extinguishing all life in the universe like that, but it is something that we can relate to the situation. And obviously, with that example, we can clearly say that it's definitely an immoral one. But from Chris's example, I mean, if all life was snapped out like that, then, I mean, it would be painless. It would be instantaneous, or at least take a few seconds. It would be over. And then the universe would be in a better state because it would be a new universe in a better state.
But you're still using sacrifice for that, which when we talk about Kent earlier, is still instrumentalizing everyone's life for another universe's lives.
Yeah. So under Kantian ethics, obviously it would still be wrong because you're not supposed to kill in any way, shape, or form as well. So from both what you said about instrumentalizing them and from the fact that you're killing people. So what about under a form of utilitarianism, though? If there's all this suffering in the universe and you get rid of it by getting rid of everyone and create a universe where everybody is happy and for the rest of their life will be happy and grateful and have all the resources they need, could an argument be made for that being moral under utilitarianism?
I think no.
No, most people would prefer not to be killed.
But they wouldn't know.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Yeah, it doesn't matter. They would prefer not to be killed. You're going against their preferences, so you're behaving immorally.
Also, I think an authoritarian like Mill that I mentioned earlier will argue that it's better for people to improve and get better moral habits, so to make people better people, than to just repeat again and hope to become better people. Because if you don't change the way that it is at the start, there is nothing stopping people from becoming bad, greedy, and awful again. Which is another point we mentioned earlier when we said it will have to be done again, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think in this new universe, it wouldn't have to be done again. It would just be perfect for all eternity. It would essentially be like the experience machine. You know, you can choose to go into it. So on that point, forget what he actually wanted to do. What if he could snap his fingers and the people in it were suddenly changed? Right, they had their cognitive processes changed, so no one was selfish anymore. Everybody did good. Everybody was a good person, but they were forced to be a good person. They were essentially changed by the snap of the fingers. It's almost a form of brainwashing. So he's fixed the problem for all eternity by changing everybody and who they are. So he's stopped evil people. You know, is that a different situation?
You've still killed them because you've killed the essence of who they are.
Oh, transport problem. Essentially.
I'm gonna
the
there.
easiest argument against it is bodily autonomy. Is if I don't choose to do it, you don't get to choose to do it to me. But it's tough with
So
that
if
kind
everyone
of
agreed.
ridiculous hypothetical.
Yes, I know it's a ridiculous hypothetical, but we're talking about superhero morality.
Yeah, that's what I meant. In a normal situation, it's not tough to figure that shit out. But in this kind of ridiculous hypothetical, it does get tougher. It just does.
I think it's just destroy morality, because to be moral, you have to have the possibility to act evil too. You have to have both possibilities. If you don't have a choice, you're no longer a moral being. You're no more different than a rock or a plant. So you're no longer a moral creature to begin with.
Well, we could say that behaving morally is a spectrum. And since most of us probably ascribe to the compatibilist idea of free will, we already agree that we operate on a certain spectrum. So just making that spectrum a bit smaller doesn't necessarily mean that your will is overtaken. We didn't say that you always act as morally as possible.
Yeah, well, I mean, in the situation though, I mean, the original new universe, everybody was happy and being good and being grateful and all that sort of thing. So, I mean, I inferred from that, and maybe I was wrong, that everybody would be acting morally, without choice, because they are happy. They weren't fighting for resource. Everybody was, yeah. So that's what I got from it. But you're right; it doesn't necessarily mean that they always would. But
Oh, no, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is there's a difference between me giving you a beer you like for your birthday and me giving you the beer you like best for your birthday.
yeah,
I think the
Yeah,
issue we have right now is that happiness is not well defined. Happiness is often defined poorly and wrongly so, I'd argue, as a state of being that can be somewhat permanent or recurrent, which I don't think is right. I don't think happiness is a state of pleasure or bliss that lasts indefinitely. I don't think that's what happiness is.
no,
contentedness could be.
yes.
As tempting as it could be. Yes. It's not. It's
Yeah,
not.
so Martin, what you were saying, is that kind of like, say I have 1,000 possible actions at the moment, 500 of them are good, 500 of them are bad. If I have the 500 bad ones removed as a possibility, I've still got 500 different actions which exist upon a spectrum, so I still have that kind of compatibilist free will. Yeah?
Yes, exactly.
So you've
Cool.
only got good choices, but you've still got different levels of good choice. So, you could sing your kid to sleep every night, or you could actually spend your time doing something a little bit more, or you could just go in there and make sure you kiss them every night and say good night. Just as a vague example of
I suppose you could translate this argument to real world if you say, well, when we gave people drugs to change their mental state, is that brainwashing them? We could translate this argument into that, and that's a good question for sure. Because as you said, we do reduce your deterministic possibilities by changing how your brain operates.
yes,
Like I take ADHD medication, which definitely influences me. Is that reducing my moral agency or not? That's a good question.
yeah.
I suppose it depends on whether you're forced to take it or not to an extent.
But it doesn't matter.
Choose
Once
not to
I
take
take it, do I get more or less moral agency or the same?
I see what you mean. Yeah. No. Yeah, that's a tougher one as well. Just everybody, it's worth remembering, if you can't produce your own serotonin, store-bought is fine.
Yeah. I mean, we could get onto the whole sort of things where, are you responsible being inebriated on different substances? Well, you are because you chose to take them in the first place. If you didn't choose to take them in the first place, then obviously they've been forced upon you. So you're not necessarily responsible for your actions because you weren't aware you're going to be behaving in a certain way. So you can't take those precautions. Having the choice to take them, okay, you are responsible, but you've got to try and consider the difference between what you were there and what you were there and actually go, would I do this in this state? And it's actually hard when you're in this state to really say, well, yeah, I probably would do this. Unless you're very experienced in different mental states such as that. Yeah. That was a bit of a segue.
I got a long way off of Thanos.
Yeah. Oh, and we got Lord Bryant saying structure is important. I think that we've gone very far off of our structure tonight. Well, I do apologise.
Can I ask? So to get back to the Thanos stuff, I want to ask a question then.
Mm-hmm.
So if we are agreeing that the original snap plan is wrong, the snap to create a new universe is wrong, the snap to forcefully change the way everybody thinks is at best grey, but still probably wrong.
Mm-hmm.
What snap could he have done to improve the universe that we would say is morally okay.
Wander
Maybe.
around doing the website story snap.
Yeah, no, fair. I'm with you.
Would we say something like giving people knowledge, like a lot of knowledge, or a lot of every single bit of ethics from the entire universe, all the thoughts on it, and giving people the choice still that they've got the knowledge in their brains that if they so choose to use it, they can choose to act as ethically and responsibly as possible. I mean, you're still
Isn't that
forcing
still taking
something
away-
into their brain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You're still forcing
the
something in.
willfully ignorant are having their autonomy taken away.
Yeah. So the snap to bring everybody to be able to hear you, to say, I can give you all the knowledge in the world. Would you like it? And if they say yes, the next snap gives it to them.
But the thing I don't understand, like, in the comic books universe, it's a multiverse, right? So there is an infinite number of universes, isn't it? So how is
some
it
of them.
possible to lack space?
Essentially.
So how can you lack space if there is an infinite number of space? So infinite number of resources. You shouldn't lack anything. You have an infinite number of universe and planets and everything. I don't get the
Right, so
problem.
we should be harvesting resources from other universes to
Well, because it's a
enough for
multiverse.
ourselves. Is that
Because it's a multiverse,
not-
it's guaranteed that there is an alternate Earth that is blank, that there isn't people living on it.
Yeah, that's a fair argument. There could be, in the multiverse, at least one universe exactly the same as ours, but completely unpopulated. But then
Exactly.
you're essentially going, well, we should put half the people in this alternate universe by their own choice, obviously. And therefore we've separated it. But then again, it's just the snap, but with a slightly nicer edge to it. Because you've given people the choice to go to the other.
Colonization is more inter-universe colonization, I guess. Which is
To be a filthy Marxist and suggest that you're all missing the whole point why he snapped his fingers in the first place. I'm going to say, we just give everybody enough fucking resources, man. Scarcity is not an issue. Marxism.
I mean, we could say the same about our planet alone there, couldn't we? If we just actually gave people the resources they need, clean water, medication, and all that sort of thing, a lot of the world's problems would probably go away, and there's definitely the money and resources in the world to do so. But we're talking about the Thanos Snap, so...
And then there's the issue again of if everybody was given enough resources, would it stay that way? Or do everybody just infinitely have the resources they need refreshed when they've run out or when they're running low? Or is there still a finite amount or what?
I mean, if you can do it...
That depends on how powerful the snap is, right? I mean, if you can sort of account bound those resources, then I guess we're okay.
Yeah, although the problem you would have is if everybody had infinite resources, surely they would eventually get to a point where you are super overpopulated in that planet as well. So you'd almost have to do something.
because you don't get the infinite refreshing space. Space will always be limited.
So
The same for time, right?
Yeah,
You don't get more life.
Exactly.
Why is space not a resource? Exactly.
Well, I mean,
Time and
with
space
the snap, you probably could do that because with the Infinity Stones, there were ones that could actually do that. So you could actually somehow, I mean, the mind boggles because it's impossible, but you could give someone infinite space, time, and resources in this particular situation. But if we were to apply it to our own planet, where if we could somehow give everyone on our own planet infinite resources, we wouldn't be able to give them infinite space and time. So we would have a problem within a more realistic bounds.
We would, because space and time itself are resources.
Bold claim. What if Thanos was wrong from the start and there was nothing to fix?
Oh.
because I just thought about like a Leibniz, which are that we already live in the perfect world. That because he said if God exists, then we already live in the perfect world, and then he go backward, justifying why everything is how it is, despite that. Well, what if that's true and Thanos shouldn't do anything because it's pointless because it's already as good as it can be?
I refuse to believe that the perfect version of a universe is one where libertarians exist. I can imagine a universe where they don't. Therefore, this one is not perfect.
You realise I'm probably going to take a little sample of you saying that and play it on repeat.
Yes.
Put it in the intro music. I don't give a fuck anymore.
Brilliant.
If Death had just put out, Thanos wouldn't have been an incel.
Oh, don't do that after I've just taken a swig of drink, you dick.
I'm sorry.
No, you're not.
Oh, that hurt.
Because I'm sure in universe, a lot of people thought that Thanos was trying to fix a non-issue. I'm sure a lot of people thought there wasn't a problem, which is an interesting thing to consider, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that realistically, I think most people would have realized there was a problem. The fact that there's any form of violence and things like that in the universe, I don't think that that all the poverty, all the struggle for resources wouldn't necessarily lead a majority of people to believe that they were in the perfect universe. There might be, people sitting there in their ivory towers on wads of cash and thinking, oh yes, I'm in the perfect universe because I have everything, and maybe the universe seems perfect to them, but the average person, I don't think.
Based on the idea that we only fight or mostly do evil because of material conditions. I mean, it is a popular point of view, but if you don't share that point of view, morally speaking, about human nature, and we assume every other intelligent life nature, you can argue that even if, like we said, everyone had infinite resources and it wasn't a struggle, that people would still fight, be evil, try to dominate each other. That will still happen, right?
Yeah, I mean, there would still be people that enjoy causing pain and suffering and things like that, wouldn't there? There'd be people that like getting in fights, but you'd lose out. Excuse me. You wouldn't have the people who are fighting for resources. You might still have violence, you might still have crime, but they would be crimes of passion because took my wife, etc. So I stabbed him. That sort of thing. You would still potentially have those things. Although, would you regard your partner as a resource, so you have infinite numbers of them as well?
So the question you're asking, Kevin, if I understand, is kind of like, at the moment, our society has a hierarchy based on wealth and resource and land, but do we intrinsically have a kind of hierarchical nature as people, which we would just find a different way to?
Well, I was thinking about a few philosophers and people that we read in philosophy but are not philosophers, like Freud, that do argue that even without any material consideration at all, there is still domination, violence, and hierarchies because people have other needs, other psychological needs that go far beyond just eating, reproducing, and pleasure from drugs. It goes far beyond those stuff. And for example, if I remember correctly, Freud said that the mechanism for liking someone is very self-centered. You usually like someone that reflects something about yourself. If you recognize a part of yourself in someone else, you like it.
Or dislike it if it's something you don't like about yourself.
Which, if you follow any philosophy at all, is very unlike other philosophers, like, for example, David Hume or Kant or anyone else that argue that no, it's about pleasures and conditioning and stuff like that, which is more in line with what we think nowadays too.
I was
But
going to
if-
make a very crass joke about how I'd like Joe a lot more if I saw a certain part of myself in him. But that's
Not again, Chris.
But that's the point, right? If we're wrong about our perspective about the cause of violence, which, by the way, I had a philosophy class about violence all semester. That's why I'm very interested right now. But if we're wrong about the nature of violence, we're trying to fix the problem the wrong way.
Hmm.
Well, that sort of depends on where and how we define resources, I guess.
Yeah,
I
I mean,
mean,
that's
like,
what I was saying about, do you regard your partner as a resource?
or time and space, like you were alluding to before, Martin.
well, time and space simply has to be a resource. I mean, those are both things that you can use to your economic advantage. So they are basically, by definition, a resource. The question, though, is whether or not non-economical benefit things are also resources. So things such as love, for instance. Can we say that it's a resource? I guess we can, because people who are more self-secure tend to, be more productive. So it's sort of maybe, but it's unclear, really.
I suppose it depends on how we really define love and whether we're talking about the emotional reaction or the neurochemical actual interaction in the brain. You could consider oxytocin a resource for sure, but love as an experience.
Also, the action form of love, the way you act towards someone, not just the feeling of love, but the actual actions that come along with love, the way you act to someone that you say you love. There are plenty of people who go, "Oh, I love you," and they don't act in a loving way towards them. Their actions don't meet. So, would we then go, okay, well, are actions a form of resource? And I think we're getting to a point where we're getting more and more absurd with the definition of what
Well,
a resource is.
there's also the point that you just mentioned experience. Well, if you go further, there is some experience that cannot be repeated. The uniqueness of something, or the novelty of something cannot be repeated. And that's a form of resources. It has value, something new, something original, something unique. That has a lot of value. Rarity in itself, scarcity in itself has value. And you cannot reproduce that in a world with infinite value, infinite resources, right?
That's true, actually. Yeah. Sometimes you value things because they are once in a blue moon or once in your entire
Like a
lifetime.
stamp collector, right? Like a stamp collector. They value
Yes.
them because they're rare, not
Yeah.
because they are authentic.
Yeah, and if every stamp was available to every single person, all of a sudden they lose their joy because there is nothing, and they go, "Oh, I've finished it."
The same with
Sometimes-
love. If you could get the same person reproduce infinitely, each individual you love will mean less, because you get what I mean, right?
Yeah.
To love is to discriminate. If you love everyone equally, then you love nobody especially. So
if Thanos could create a universe where we had infinite resources, it would actually end up being bad because it would devalue those resources in and of themselves.
in a way, I think
Well, partly because your ability to enjoy those resources would then also possibly be resource, which would still mean that you can do everything.
But then if you have infinite pleasure, does then pleasure become just the norm, and therefore that becomes something you actually seek out pain because actually it's something different because you've got the infinite resource of pleasure? And as I said, we're getting further and further absurd with this definition of resource.
It all gets a bit recursive at this point, doesn't it?
All I know is that Epicurus just jizzed himself.
it does get the point across, though, that it's not really as simple as, if we could make everyone happy, we should just do it, because to be happy in itself is not something we understand very well. We all want it. We all know somewhat what it is to be happy, but we don't understand it well enough to do it for everyone else.
It gives us a reason to move forward in life, to improve ourselves. The search for happiness is as much part of happiness. than is actually just being happy all the time, because there are so many things you can say. If you were actually happy all the time, you'd end up being bored of happiness, and therefore happiness would lose its effect. So that's a very good point. So, as you said, Chris, no matter what Thanos does, we're fucked.
Yeah.
And that's sort of back to your point as well, Kevin. You know, could we actually be in the perfect universe already? I mean, we'd argue that there are some things that really need to be dealt with, but maybe that is part of being in the perfect universe, having the obstacles to overcome. And
One of the
actually,
points make is that the reason why there is evil, the reason why everything seems fucked and imperfect, is because that's what it is to be perfect in his view. He said if you take the universe as a wall and not just individual parts of it, the sum of it is perfection. Which sounds baffling, I understand it. But when you actually read what he wrote, it does make some sense. It's kind of weird, but it does make sense. The idea that if you take a large perspective, the perspective that we assume a being like God can have, but no one else, then maybe you can see it as being perfect. Because what else could it be? If God is perfect because he is everything, well, then you consider the universe as a whole as being perfect, right? It's a twisted kind of logic, but it does make sense for a theist to say that. To be honest.
No, I can understand that point of view. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I can understand the conclusion.
I'm just saying it's not as absurd as it looks, because I understand it's very unintuitive for people nowadays, and even at the time, people thought, "What the fuck, dude?" Even T.S. said, "The world isn't perfect. What are you talking about?"
Yeah, but it's part of a perfect whole. Sorry, Chris.
I just can't believe that Kevin just swore on our live stream.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, fucking hell. What the fuck, man? We don't fucking swear
we
here.
can completely disregard your argument. It's fine. Sorry, dude. I'm sorry. I couldn't help it.
That's my ADHD. I'm so sorry.
Jesus Christ, hookers, bitches.
I think that we're in agreement that the Thanos Snap is immoral. The second Thanos Snap that he was going to do, also immoral. And in fact, there probably isn't a Thanos Snap that can be done that was not immoral in some way, shape, or form. So basically, no matter what he did, he was wrong, even though he might have had his best intentions to go along with it. Now, that because he had good intentions, it doesn't necessarily mean he was evil. It just means that he did bad things for good reasons.
Well, he could also do just simply a benign Addams Family snap.
Was it moral to unsnap? Because we consider that he did it. Was it moral to unsnap people the way that?
Oh, well, the interesting thing there is it was what, 2 years later as well. So many people had their 5, was it?
Yeah.
So 5 years later, so many people that they knew, they were suddenly at a very different stage in their life. So I mean that causes additional problems. So I suppose if they had managed to also wind back time and get everybody back at the moment that they left, nothing's changed. It's basically and they've just what happened there? I had a little weird blink. The
thing I'm curious about is we see in the Spider-Man film that when they're brought back, they come back in exactly the same place. There's the band during a baseball game in the school hall. What about the people who were on an aeroplane when they were snapped away?
Well, what about everyone? If they're brought back in the same place, how? Because the Earth will have moved in 5 years. So it's not going to be in the same place if we're going to get rid...
If I was snapped in my building, and my building was rebuilt and a different one, and I respawn in a wall, do I die or just I spawn next to the wall? How does it work?
You could end up with a kind of fly type situation where you come into existence exactly where somebody else is at that time.
Oh my
and
God,
imagine if that was your wife's new partner. No, don't imagine that.
But that's the other thing about it as well. When you bring up that 5 years, people will have moved on with their life. So there are people who will have got new partners in that time, and all of a sudden you've caused more problems there as well, because then you've got the problem of the heart. Like, well, you were dead, so I've moved on, I've dealt with it, and for them a second's gone, so they're still in love with this person, and this person's gone, well, I did love you, I really did, but that was 5 years ago. So that's a good question. Did the snapback, was that immoral in itself? I think it is potentially a lesser of two evils situation.
That seemed reasonable to me.
Yeah. I think it's better than not snapping back, but it's still actually caused a hell of a lot of problems in doing so. What do you guys think?
It's what I actually wanted to see from Endgame, was the first scene to be like 5-10 years later and actually have it so the snap worked and did what Thanos intended it to do, and then the people are snapped back. It's like, but so you've got that kind of emotional moving on, but you've also got like, but the world was better, and I'm really glad you're back, but shit, Thanos was right. That would have been fucking amazing to have at the beginning of the film.
Right, there we go. We need a rewrite of Endgame.
Regardless of how you do it, though, it's a dick move. I mean, everybody's expended all this energy, done all this stuff to move on with their lives, and then all of a sudden you're just back where you left off. That's just a dick move.
Yeah, and what if you were someone that was snapped away, and you come back and you have to start over because you were assumed dead, so everything you own, everything you add is gone. You start physically homeless again.
Yeah, you actually would have nothing in that situation. Yeah, that's crazy.
So, and all of this happened just because a rat happened to walk across the dashboard of an old van. So Thanos wasn't immoral because he thought he was doing right. The worst character in the entire MCU is that one random rat.
I do not get this reference because I do not know anything about Marvel.
Ah. Right, does anyone else have anything to add on the snap before we move on?
No.
Cool. So Josh sent in a question. How you doing, Josh? I know you're busy today. I hope you managed to catch this. I don't know if you got any of it, saw the fumbles earlier, but anyway. He says, does Wonder Woman's lasso make people tell the actual truth or what they perceive as truth? Now, I liked this question because I've been running a series of polls on Twitter recently about lying and whether people are lying if they believe what they're saying. So at the end of the day, if I believe that the world is flat and I tell you that the world is flat, I'm not lying, I'm just passing on a falsehood. So in this instance, does it make them tell the actual truth or what they perceive as the truth? So what he's asking there is, does it have a way of getting into their brain and going, right, ignoring all the bullshit, this is the actual facts about the situation? Or is it, well, this is what the person believes is the truth of situation? Chris, do you have anything to add on that?
I mean, yes, but it kind of just outright answers the question. So if you want to go to other people first, go for it.
Okay. Go on,
Does the lasso bestow knowledge upon them, or does it just make them express knowledge they already have?
The actual canon answer is that it compels people to be honest.
So if it compels people to be honest, that would be what their perception of the truth is, rather than what the actual truth is. So it doesn't go through and get rid of the crap. It actually makes them tell what they perceive. So they could still get the wrong answer. If someone was kidnapped and they thought they were in X building, but actually they were in Y building, and they told Wonder Woman, oh yeah, it's in X building, because that's what they believe to be the case. They have told the truth to the best of their knowledge. They've just wrong.
Yeah, to be wrong is not to lie.
Exactly.
What I would find quite interesting with it is if it compels somebody to be honest. So let's take the flat earther example. If somebody is a flat earther because they genuinely believe the evidence videos that they've seen on YouTube, and Wonder Woman said, "Is the Earth flat?" they would definitely say yes. If somebody is a flat earther because they've seen both sides of it, but they like the idea of the Earth being flat, so they've lied to themselves about which side is most convincing, what would they then say?
Yeah, does it come down to what they actually believe? So this comes down to, have they told themselves a convincing enough lie that they begin to believe it and they actually believe it? Or do they just say what they want to be true, but actually believe something else?
I think the answer is simpler than you think, because if I said a sentence, I know there is no cat on the rug, but I believe there is one, you'll call me stupid. Because you cannot say that you know something and not believe it. So if you
Moore's
say
paradox.
if you say I know that the Earth is flat, but you don't believe it, well, you're dumb. It's not possible. You're straight up lying, and it's obvious.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's
but
when you're
it's the
bringing
lasso
knowledge
of
into
truth.
Huh?
It's the lasso of truth, not the lasso of intelligence.
it.
You can still be
My
dumb.
point is that if someone convince themselves that it is likable, but they still know that it is false, then it will be a lie. You say, "Oh yeah, I believe that." No, you don't. You just like it, and you know that.
Yes, but
That's
there
the
are
point.
some people that are good enough at lying to themselves that they actually believe their own lies. So they almost compartmentalize the knowledge and they reject it, they throw it out, and instead they are saying, right, you know, they now have a belief, they've gone over it. Almost, Pavlovian dog is not exactly the one, but they've conditioned themselves to actually believe a thing that they once knew was false, but they now believe it to be true because they've managed to delete that from their
Well,
mind.
I think it's
The way
possible that
that
someone.
works. So we all kind of do that in a way, not to the same cause and result, but the same process. Look at the fallibility of memory. I remember absolutely 100% sure what I did on my 16th birthday, and it'll be an absolutely different memory to what somebody else who was there, because over time it's just changed a little bit, and I've convinced myself that that little change is true. And then it's changed a bit, and I've convinced myself that that little change is true. And then over the last 19 years, I bet my memory of my 16th birthday is completely fucking wrong.
Or
That's
part.
kind,
It's
that's
the
kind of what I
same
was
essential
going.
process.
That's kind of what I was going to say. I was going to say that I think it's possible that your degree of belief change. Something that David Hume referred to as the accustomed to. You know, he says that like there is true relationship that we use to decide if we believe something to be true, to be existent. And there's causation, which is the strongest one. Contiguity, which is like how close it is to you and your previous beliefs. And then you got resemblance, how similar it is to yourself, your already belief. So it might seem confusing to say, well, isn't contiguity and resemblance the same thing? Not really. Like, for example, if you love someone, when they go far away, you will feel the pain harsher, right? That's contiguity. But if you like someone because they are similar to you, that's resemblance.
Right.
And if you like something because you did it, because you're proud of your own action, that's causation. And the same can be said about believing that the Earth is flat. The more close you get to believe for some reason, for example, if you start going to a stream about the flat earthers, with the flat earthers, you're going to get closer to their beliefs because of contiguity. If the people are likable and to remind you of yourself, well, maybe you will feel a resemblance. And if you feel like there is a causality between some of their statements and the idea of the Earth being flat, you will start believing much strongly in it too.
And that then becomes a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy as well, because
Exactly.
the more you believe them, the more they resemble you.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you get that sort of in group sort of thing. So in that situation, Kevin, would you say that even though they once knew that this information was false, they now could technically believe it to be true?
Well, the truth would be that I knew that I believed that it was false. Then I changed my mind, and now I know that I was wrong to believe that it was false, that it was true.
Yeah.
Because that's how it works, right?
Yeah, that's a really good way of describing it.
Yeah.
Like if I told you that I believe that, I don't know, X country existed, and then I learned that, oh no, this country didn't exist for 300 years. Well, what I will say is I know that I knew that before, but it was false, and now I know it is false. Well, we can say the reverse for anything, but you get my point.
Mm-hmm.
That's the idea.
So, would this Wonder Woman power work against confabulation?
How so?
What?
The confabulation is when somebody, for instance, experiences something but doesn't really register or store it in their brain. They then go about and fill in the blanks with something that is often a lie, right? So, would this whole Wonder Woman skill, I forgot what it's called, work against something like that?
So you're saying that they've got holes in their memory and they fill them with things. I mean, there's even medical conditions where people do have short-term memory issues, and they fill that in with, random stories that they tell themselves. Sorry, Dave, did you have something to add there?
I was just going to say, all it would do would bring out the self-narrative that they've used to fill in those gaps.
So, no.
If they're particularly self-aware, they might be compelled to say that they're not entirely sure that their story is true.
Plus, like Chris mentioned, isn't memory already like that? Don't we already fill the blanks to begin with?
Yeah, we definitely do.
Well,
I mean,
there's a hard difference, though.
Yes. Yeah, no, you're right that there is a difference, but
it's creating a useful fiction to fill in the blanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, but sometimes a very forced one.
Yeah, but it depends on
a client, for instance, who gets 2 bags of pills at 8 o'clock. He then forgets to take his medicine, and we get there at 10 o'clock, and we say, "You forgot your medicine," and then he says, No, the pharmacy got it wrong. I just got 4 bags of fucking pills today.
I think the reason why this point is about the lying is so interesting is a lot of people call other people liars these days, and I think the reason why people are so suspicious, as like you said, if someone truly believe it, well, they're not lying, and people still say no, you're still lying, is because people don't like false honesty. People grifters. That's the term people use nowadays. People who pretend to believe something for a personal gain.
Yeah, and there definitely are people that pretend to do it. And I do want to do a stream at some point that addresses lying and forms of lying and falsehoods in the future. So I don't necessarily want to get too deep into this one, but please carry on with what you were going to say.
Well, just that because people are so skeptical of grifters, of people pretending to believe something, even if someone truly believes something stupid for reals and isn't lying about that, people will sometimes assume that it's grifting, that it's just someone pretending to believe that. Like, take anti-vaxxers. A lot of people will say that they're lying about vaccines. But I think you agree with me that a lot of people are genuinely concerned about vaccines. They truly believe they are dangerous, they are scared of it. It's honest. They're not lying about it, I think. I think most of them are very honest about that.
I think they're trying to do the best they can for their family. They're just incredibly wrong and putting lots of people in danger. And it might have been born of lies. The whole Andrew Wakefield case and everything like that, where he was lying because he got a payoff from lawyers and he was going through court cases and all of that. That might have been one of the key inspirational points of the whole anti-vax movement. And so it might be based on a lie, but they still don't necessarily believe that that was a lie in itself. They think that, oh no, it's an excuse by the conspiracy. The government actually planned for this. So even then, it's not a lie. A lot of the anti-vaxxers, I think, apart from maybe the ones who are selling you something, I think a
Yeah,
lot.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I think a lot of the anti-vaxxers are genuinely telling the truth to the best of their knowledge. The problem is they're wrong. They just
It's
don't realize
naivety,
they're
not
wrong.
it's naivety, not lying.
Yeah, exactly. And let's face it, not many people out there can have the level of scientific knowledge that is required, and people are taken in by various conspiracies all the time. It's so easy to be swept away and have this special knowledge and think that you're doing the best you can for your friends and family and all of that. I mean, we've all been mistaken before. It's just a shame that it seems
Yeah,
very
we
hard
just
to
have
break.
to take the mass debacle in March, right? Remember when people were unsure if masks were good or not, and then people start calling the media liars because they said it wasn't useful, and then they said, "Oh, we were wrong. Actually, it was useful."
Yeah.
Well, they were not lying. They were truly believing it at that point, right? That
Yeah,
it
well,
wasn't
as far as we
useful.
know that they were telling it at the point, there are people that go, well, no, they were just saying that because they wanted the PPE for the hospital workers and all of that. And if everybody went out and bought masks, there are, I suppose that's a conspiracy in itself, isn't it? I don't know if that's true. I tend to
Yeah.
go with what you just said, that, yeah, you know what, they were mistaken. They didn't know, and they were
One-
told
one of
one
the-
thing, and then it turned out to be wrong.
One of the problems of conspiracy theories is that often what you describe is metaphysically possible, sometimes even physically possible, but morally impossible. Like, it isn't possible that every person you know is conspiring against you. It isn't morally conceivable. It isn't conceivable that every government is in cahoots and try to fuck everyone else. Oh, sorry, I swear. Yeah.
No, we don't care. Don't worry.
We're not monetized.
It's just not
Yeah, I
conceivable.
was just taking the piss before. I'm sorry.
Yeah, genuinely, don't worry about it.
But yeah, I think that's the problem with conspiracy theories, because when you think about it, it's not impossible what you're describing. It is conceivable metaphysically. You can logically conceive it, and it is sometimes even possible physically speaking. Like, it is possible that a vaccine doesn't work,
Yeah.
or that it could be dangerous. It is conceivable.
Yeah.
But what is inconceivable is that everyone is trying to insert chips in your arms to monitor you for some obscure reason.
Yeah, I mean, we've got these
Impossible,
with us
just
anyway, haven't we?
Yeah.
This is our monitoring, our computers, our streams, our social media, and all of that. I find it incredibly hilarious when they go, I'm not getting that. They're typing on their phone, I'm not going to get this thing. They'll monitor what I'm saying and doing. And like, really? I mean, how unrealistic is it to even power something like that anyway? I mean, I know it is, again, possible, but the amount of money to go into microchipping and everything like that. And as you say,
I'm curious how much we should be going against conspiracy theorists when Martin has an Illuminati symbol in the corner of his room. There's a pyramid with a fucking eye on the top. I need tinfoil in my hat. Give me a
Real
minute.
spirit art, healthcare workers, right? Those
Sorry?
are real spirit now.
Tinfoil hat. I don't have anything that interesting,
you,
although I do
Martin, I'm
have a
sorry.
random Buddha. There you go. I'm secretly religious. You didn't know that. Ha ha ha. We've really gone off base though. We've gone into vaccine and conspiracy theory, and all we were talking about was the lasso of truth. Although it did get Chris
It
too.
can't make you tell information that you don't know. It will compel you to tell what you believe is the truth. It's the proper answer.
So, on that front, is it moral to force someone to tell the truth?
No.
No. So, the lasso of truth is actually an immoral thing, a power for someone to have. Anything where you are taking away someone's consent in any way, shape, or form and forcing them to do something against their will could technically be regarded as immoral. But it could be a lesser of two evils situation where tell me how to defuse this bomb because the bomb is going to wipe out an entire city. Therefore, you would actually see that as a lesser of two evils, dirty hand style problem.
So would we say that, for instance, shit, I lost the word. God damn it. That for psychotherapy as part of a criminal sentence is also morally wrong?
That's a good question. Would we regard even the punishment? I think they've done something that has taken away someone else's rights, and legally that is their punishment, but morally, I don't know.
Well, a lot of people argue that therapy is way less effective if you don't consent to it to begin with. So
That's true.
maybe it shouldn't even be done.
No, you're right. If they don't consent to it, is it going to help them? And then you'd end up having to go to more extreme forms of therapy that may cause a lot of harm, and actually may make the situation even worse, just to try and subjugate them into wanting the therapy.
Well, there are studies that show, and I believe my country is especially fairly effective in this, that forced psychiatric therapy for terrorists can actually deconvert them from at least extremism.
That's interesting. Is
Maybe
that
maybe
because
work on
they've
some
been
fringe
convinced in that way, though? Have they been their mind warped? They've been so indoctrinated into believing certain things that actually that is the reason why it works. They've been forced into a particular mindscape, so therefore they're forced out of it. Is that why it works, or is it something else?
From what I understand, it's a combination of pharmaceuticals and cognitive behavioral therapy.
I'm just wondering if it's one of those things that it works because they've been twisted into a particular frame of mind in the first place, and if they weren't necessarily willingly an extremist in the first place, they've had it drummed into them to behave a certain way. They've had their mind twisted, whether that was with CBT in itself in the first place, I don't know, but would it be as effective on someone that actually just went, do you know what? Fuck it, I'm going to blow up the world. They've made a conscious decision rather than being led down a path.
Well, when it comes to extremism, oftentimes it's people who have been radicalized by outside sources, not necessarily against their will, but also not necessarily conforming to their will. So we already have a gray area to begin with. And then what the government basically does is just get involved and basically first drug somebody way beyond recognition, and then starts behavioral therapy.
Yes. Okay.
Which this does raise a question for me. We're talking about like terrorists and stuff, which made me think, what do you think makes someone an hero to begin with? Because we talk about superheroes, but what does make someone an hero? Because we could ask the question, is some form of terrorism ever justified to begin with? Can you be an hero that does terrorism, for example?
I think in most everyone is the hero of their own story is a phrase you often hear. Generally, people believe that they are in the right. So if there is if heroism is purely subjective, then that statement rings true, and people will perceive it to be that way. But if we were to say what is the scale for what actually is a hero, I think it's someone. I think there's a certain element of virtue. I think there's certain things of doing good, doing the right thing, trying to protect people, trying to help people, maybe even putting yourself at risk on hold for others. You're stepping into situations, you're stopping someone from getting mugged. Because even little things, though, someone drops their bag of shopping and you step in to help it pick it up. Even little things like that are good traits. So
that's something I'm wondering. Like, if you think about who we consider heroes in the real world, not superheroes, just regular hero, you notice something interesting. First of all, heroes tend to be people that distinguish themselves. Not always, but often. Nowadays we use it more liberally when we say that, like I said earlier, the healthcare workers are heroes, But usually we reserve that for special occasion. And some people are both heroes and villains, right? So, like some people would consider that the French revolutionaries during the French Revolution were both. They were heroes, but also villains, because after the revolution, there was what we call the Great Terror, which was awful. So it's interesting to look at, depending on who is looking at the person in question, it can be both an hero and a villain, which you don't get as much in comics.
I think heroism as well implies a degree of risk.
Yeah.
I think, as you were saying, Joe, there are these things you can do which are good, and doing those good things doesn't necessarily make one a hero. To be a hero, it implies at least some degree of personal risk at the same time. So whether it's stepping in and a mugging where you might get injured, or whether it's being a frontline care worker during a pandemic. But picking up somebody's shopping and giving to them because their plastic bag broke, not so much.
No, that's just a good behavior. That's a good behavior to demonstrate. Exactly.
As a frontline worker during a pandemic, I do have to say that I detest the idea that we are fucking heroes. We are sacrificial lambs, not more.
Just put your pants on the outside of your trousers, wear a cape, and own it.
No, I will not, because it's a reason for me to not get extra pay, and it's fucking pissing me off.
Not fair.
But would you agree with me that normally, except the fact we do use it liberally for healthcare workers to be nice to them, do you think I'm right to say that we do reserve it to only a certain category of people usually? The word hero, I mean.
Yeah, I think we do. And as I said, that there are people that will view it in a different way, and it's probably harder to get an agreement on what a hero actually is or ought to be than what people perceive heroism as. But I think there are a few things that we can say that, in general, that we would expect of a hero. As Chris said, doing a good thing with a degree of risk towards you. Now, there, as Martin says, there's a nature where he might disagree with it himself because, it's just his job. That's what he signed up to do, and this is one of the risks of the job. You could even argue, well, actually, that is part of the reason that you are a hero, because you've chosen to take a job where there are these risks. You've chosen to put yourself. You could think about something like a fire person as another one. They rush into burning buildings. Okay, they also just save cats, but they rush into burning buildings. They've chosen to do that. They don't have to do that job. They could get another job, but they've chosen to do something where they put themselves at risk for the benefit of others. So you could say that that's quite a heroic profession to be in. Does that make them a hero to the scale that we are saying? Is there a difference between something that is heroic and someone that is actually a hero? So we could say, going back to the care workers, you're in a heroic profession. Does that make you a hero yourself? Not necessarily, but you're in a heroic profession.
Yeah, I disagree. I think a few things are necessary for heroism. One of the things is, for instance, a degree of voluntarism. You have to voluntarily be in such a position. Bravery, which goes to the risk part, but also to the desire to overcome the risk, of course. And the outstanding moral character that we assume with heroes, which is why my definition of anti-hero is better than yours. Anyway, what that means for a social care worker like myself, I didn't volunteer to be in this profession in this situation. So we can debate that, of course, but basically, when I signed up to care for people with a handicap, I didn't think I'd be doing it during a pandemic. So the volunteerism part, yeah, right? The same thing goes for the risk. I didn't anticipate the risk, so I didn't volunteer the risk, right?
But isn't being a hero to rise to occasion, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that being a hero to begin with?
Yeah, but again, when you're forced to rise to the occasion, because if you don't, you'll have to basically change your life because you have to change your job.
You'll be
That's
Yeah.
helpless.
not really heroism.
Yeah, I think I agree because you don't really have a choice to begin with because it's your job.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
If the people that volunteer, you could argue that they are somewhat heroes because they do volunteer and they are not pressured to do it,
Yeah,
but
I mean,
you're
like,
pressured to stay.
yeah, like the doctors that came back out of their profession to help, out of retirement, sorry, to help out, even though they didn't have to, putting themselves at risk. But then you could, back to what I was saying about a heroic profession, there is risk that you were aware of within your profession. You do have
wanna add
clients
one
that
thing,
hit you.
though.
Sorry?
I just want to add one thing, is that by Martin's own definition of how it works, if he's not a hero, he's at least an anti-hero.
Yeah, I am.
You're doing the good thing, just not necessarily for the right reasons.
Money.
Yeah, but so going back to the profession, though, there were risks that you were aware of that could happen within your profession, like getting beaten up by your clients because they have certain issues that might cause them to behave in a certain way. So you are putting yourself at risk for their benefit. So there is a certain level of heroism to choosing that profession, knowing those things, even if it doesn't necessarily make you a hero yourself. We could say, though, choosing to do something like that, there is something heroic about it.
Yes, but that also goes to the intent when going for that job. And in my case, well, it's fairly personal, but my main intention was, hey, I can do this.
That's fair. Okay. And that's a good point to bring up as well. Intent plays a big part of it. If you accidentally save someone's life, you had a good consequence, but it wasn't necessarily a heroic action. If you accidentally...
Anti-hero.
Sorry?
Anti-hero.
Yeah, you accidentally stop a mugging.
Yeah, because an historian could argue that the social media influencers, the people that just do good things to look good, they are doing good deeds, but they are doing it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
However, maybe if I was an utilitarian like Mill, I could argue, well, maybe they will start liking being good people and then do it for the good reason. So it's a win-win anyway.
Yeah.
The same can be said about heroes. Maybe to start as anti-heroes, but become benign heroes later. Who knows?
That's a very good point. Yeah. So, I mean, we don't necessarily have a clear definition of what we would regard someone as a hero, but we would say that there is a definite intent to do a good thing, generally with some risk to yourself. That is one of the clear thing of a heroic action, and I suppose there'd be a consistency in doing that all the time, or at least quite regularly, for someone to be regarded as a hero themselves. To do heroic actions regularly makes one a hero.
Also, it must be voluntary.
Yes, yeah. Well, that comes back to the intent side of things, doesn't it? You're doing it for the right reasons because you want to do it for those reasons. So
Not necessarily. I mean, a soldier may be forced to do something heroic, but he will still be forced.
yes, but then isn't that his intent? His intent is because he wants to be a soldier, rather than his intent is to do the thing.
Yeah, but because he's under order, he doesn't really have free agency.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree with what you're saying. I just see a blur between those two sort of things. But yeah, that's fair.
So if I stop muggings from happening as often because I streak around a bad area of town and make everyone too uncomfortable to go out, I'm a hero.
Yes, everybody in your local area right now, go out. Well, not right now if it's cold, but go out naked and find your muggles and go like that to them till they bugger
Yep.
off.
It
You
does
do it
make
enough
it
times.
slightly uncomfortable to sew your logo on, but it's there's the risk.
There you go.
You can also tattoo it.
But that's just not as fun.
Fuck, I wish I'd thought of that last week.
Brilliant. Is there anything else that we've got along the superhero front that you think we need to cover off? Any particular powers or anything like that you think would be good to bring up?
I think the morality of telepathy, invisibility, and other powers of the same type that can cause an issue for, to respect the private privacy and stuff like that can be interesting.
Yeah, so we'll start with the more obvious one. Telepathy. You're invading someone's mind. That is definitely morally questionable, straight up. And we could again say it could be a situation where it's a lesser of two evils. You're reading someone's mind so that you can get the code to defuse a bomb.
But isn't that the same argument someone used for justifying like waterboarding and very hardcore torture, right? That's the same argument.
It is, with less harm being caused, less suffering being caused,
Well,
and
that's
reading the mind.
Maybe it's hard. Maybe it causes pain
That's
to be
true.
forced.
That's true. I suppose you don't know, but there's something like Professor X's power. It doesn't seem to cause pain unless someone's really trying to resist him. So, say for example that he was reading someone's mind to save someone. It's definitely going to cause less pain than torture, less suffering than torture. Also, it's more inclined to work because torture doesn't always work. You can't guarantee torture working, can you? They quite often they say it's a bad thing, and eventually they just say anything that will get you to either stop doing what they're doing or kill you, just so that the pain can end. But it's not necessarily the truth. It's not necessarily coherent. So I'd say it was better than torture, even though it is making the same sort of argument. It's a better lesser of two evils argument. Are there any other things that we need to consider about telepathy? What about if someone can't control their telepathy? You know, they read everyone's minds and find out all their secrets, but they don't necessarily want to.
Like receiving radio that's always turned on.
Yeah, essentially. You do see this often, especially when people are coming into their own powers in movies and they happen to have a form of telepathy. They can't control it. They just hear everything around them. Whatever anyone is thinking, they can't help it themselves.
I think the moral thing to do if you are in this situation is to not use any information you get that way as in any way. Actually, you shouldn't use it. Like, you shouldn't use it for personal gain, obviously, or for any other equation. The only exception I will make is, of course, if you uncover like a secret plot to like, I don't know, nuke a city or something.
Or a child.
That's an exception. Yeah. But usually, if you learn something very private, you shouldn't use that information for anything. You should just keep it for yourself.
Definitely. But because they can't control the power, we'd argue that they're not necessarily being immoral by that invasion of privacy because they just can't help it.
Yeah. It's what they do with the information that matters then.
Yeah, they'd be immoral to use that information even if they weren't being immoral in gaining it.
Fair enough. So the next one you mentioned was invisibility. Every teenage boy's dream to be able to go invisible and go into the locker room and see everybody changing.
I think also to change your appearance to whatever you are too. That goes into the same category of changing your how you look, right?
Yeah.
Whether it is invisible or changing your appearance, you can use it to fool people or to
Yes.
be seen.
So on
And
that
that-
front, what about?
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen some of these makeovers that you see some people do, where they transform themselves into a completely different person. They've got so much makeup on, but they actually, they've got really bad skin and all of that sort of thing, and they become someone completely else. So you've bought into what they're selling you. Right, this particular person looks a certain way. Would you say, in that instance, because they presented this thing, that they are immoral by covering up what they look like so much? Essentially, is extreme makeup immoral?
Oh, because if you genuinely believe that the girl at the bar has got crimson eyelids and lips, then you're a fucking idiot in the first place, and screw you.
Well, I think
People, come on.
I will be cautious with that idea, because if you take the position that like anything trying to cover your face or anything is wrong, then you have to go further and think, well, is it wrong to use a push-up bra? Is it wrong to be a trans person? Because some people are that trans people are fooling us, which is not what I think of. But some people could see those arguments as being related, don't you think?
Yeah. Well, you could even say the same about a beard.
Yeah.
It's changed my face. I look better with a beard. I do. I've had 3 of us here have got beards, so it's a good one. Yeah, technically, if I was to shave off this beard and you were to look at me, you'd go, "Oh, you're not as attractive. You're not what I took home last night."
But that's
So
the
the
point,
beard
right?
actually makes you more attractive? What?
Yeah, I know. This is as good as it gets.
But are we fooling people when we use makeup, beards, or good looking clothes? I don't think so. And even if you do look really different, for example, like I said, if someone wanted to take what I'm saying and say, are trans people fooling people? Well, not necessarily, because the point of fooling someone is trying to make them believe something that you know is false. If you're a trans person, for example, you think that your new appearance reflects who you are, so it's not lying. You truly think that it's more authentic. The same can be said about a beard. If you have a beard, you can say it feels more like me. So it's not really lying. What can be considered lying is if you decide to use it to gain an advantage, and you know that it isn't for those reasons I mentioned. That can be considered fooling someone.
So if you use a beard, for instance, like me, because you're ashamed for the like 3 chins that hang beneath the original one, would that be bad?
No. No, because you feel better about it, and you're trying to do
You're
it.
making somebody believe something that's not true.
No, I think what Kevin's trying to say is if for unrealistic situation, but say you there was a particular woman that loved beards and you knew she did, but she was also really well off, right? And you used your beard to gain access to her property and steal her jewels. You've used your beard for an ulterior motive. You've not done it because, hey, I like my beard. I like how it makes me look. I like that it hides this bit here. You're not doing that. You're actually going and for an ulterior motive. I'm growing this beard so I can rip this person off.
And going back
Gain
to
access to property and rip off her jewels, that's about the nicest metaphor I've ever heard for
no, getting back to the superpower, to make a comparison, it's an entirely different thing, because having a beard or wearing makeup or wearing fancy clothes, they're part of a socially expected norm.
Mm-hmm.
Any person we see, we can expect that to be a thing. Being invisible fucking well isn't. So
or being mystic, changing your appearance to someone else, right? Or mystic and text message can change your appearance to anyone else, which isn't.
Yeah.
But again, is it immoral to just change, or is it immoral to change what she looks like only if she is trying to get something else. So, for example, if she's decided, do you know what? I thought it might be fun to be a bloke for the day, so I'm just going to see what it's like. Oh yeah, I've experienced what it's like being a bloke. But if she turns around and goes, right, do you know what? I'm going to turn myself into this supermodel to try and get into this bank and steal this sort of thing. You know, it's the motive, isn't it? Just being able to change her appearance to look like something else isn't necessarily immoral. So we could say the same, you know, like we were saying for the beard, if you use that to get it, or if you happen to cake on loads of makeup because you had a goal, you wanted to deceive someone to, I don't know, get them in bed, and again, steal the jewels or whatever.
And the case of shapeshifting is still a bit iffy, because let's take a very embarrassing but realistic example. If you shapeshift because you want to please your partner fetishes and preferences, is that already, like, if I shapeshift into, I don't know, a celebrity without the consent of the celebrity, just to have fun in my bedroom, is that right or not? Because I am using that person image for my own personal benefit, my own personal pleasure. No one is harmed in that, of course. No one is harmed. But it's still a bit iffy, isn't that?
I'm thinking the point is at the failure to disclose. So when you look, for instance, there are people who can actually do this. I don't know if you guys have ever watched Face Off, which is a show on I believe here we get it on Spike.
No, I thought you meant the movie.
No.
I wanted to take
some kind of a series with makeup artists, basically, who go on to work for movies, and they can basically make any kind of face you want, just by prosthetics that you can stick to your face, throw over some makeup, and you can, I don't know, Joe can look like Angelina Jolie if he wants, right? I don't think that there's anything really wrong with that until he uses that appearance and fails to disclose the fact that he is not, in fact, Angelina Jolie.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. I mean, you look at the cosplayers who can make themselves look like anyone. There's one that I follow that she's amazing. I mean, 1 second she's Johnny Depp.
She's incredible.
Yeah. She can just actually, she just somehow looks like whoever it is. Her ability to do the makeup and all the clothes and everything like that. But as you say, we know who she is. She's posting it on her profile on Instagram. There is the disclosure of, this is me, I'm pretending to be this person. If she, however, went out in public and went on Jack Sparrow, savvy, and somehow got some gain from doing so, then again, that's the problem. She's failed to disclose it. So disclosure is a big element with this.
But what about invisibility? Because if you disclose that you're invisible, you're no longer unseen to a certain point, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're probably still unseen, but you're definitely not unheard. Yeah, the people are aware that you're there. So you go into a changing room. Hello, everyone. I'm here. You can't see me, but I'm staring at all of you. Ha ha ha.
That would be such a mindfuck.
Sorry, what was that, Martin?
That would be such a mindfuck. That'd be awesome.
No, but I was thinking, like, you know, if Mystique take the metro and she's shapeshifting into a celebrity, that's a bit wrong, because people will wrongly assume that she is that celebrity. But what if I take the metro as an invisible man? Like, what's the point of that?
Yeah,
Like,
I mean,
Get walked into a lot.
Yeah, you will get walked into it. You might overhear a few conversations that you probably wouldn't have if they hadn't realised that you were there. They might have been spoken in hushed tones, but actually because there was only you two in the carriage and the invisible person. Yeah, again, it's situational, isn't it?
The ethical way to be invisible is for your entire body to be invisible, but your dick to glow like a fucking flare. Like, what the fuck is that? Oh shit. No.
Yeah, the thing with a lot of the invisible things. though, isn't it? They actually have to be naked to be invisible. Some of them
Which
they
is
can.
very funny.
Yes, but some of them they can cloak their clothes as well. But in general, they have to be naked to be fully invisible. So does that add an almost additional layer of wrongness to it as well? Because if you
Well-
consider that they were visible and they were nude in a situation, you'd perceive it as, in certain situations, you'd perceive it as wrong. But
I
because
think
they're
that makes it less useful though, because if you're naked into winter in Canada, good luck.
Exactly what I was thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a pretty crap power, and unless you live somewhere where it's quite a temperate climate all year round.
You will still get eaten by mosquitoes because I don't think they need to
Invisible?
see you.
Yeah. Would they still be able to smell you?
I think so.
Yeah, so
Why
they
not?
might. So you'd basically, if you were somewhere like Michigan, around the Great Lakes in the summer, you'd just be this walking mosquito pile. Cool, awesome. Was there anything else you think that we need to add to this? Because we're getting close to the end of the time. I know we started a little bit later than intended, but we do try and finish by about 11. Sorry, what was that, Chris?
I said, I think we're good.
Yeah, I do too. Any of you others got anything to add? Cool.
Only something that would take far too long.
Well, why don't you say it and leave it as a cliffhanger, and we'll cover it in the new year.
The superpower of money.
Ooh, okay. So that's our cliffhanger, and we'll come back in the new year. We won't even give it any context to what he means. You're just going to have to think about it and write in the comments and let us know what you think he's going to say. Anyway, tonight we've covered superhero morality and supervillain morality. We've covered vigilantes and vigilante justice. And whether they're actually giving a form of justice or if it is actually injustice. We've spoken about the Thanos Snap and various iterations of it, and how basically under pretty much any circumstance it's always immoral. And yeah, we covered off random powers like invisibility and Josh's question about the whip of truth. So we, I think, have covered superhero morality quite well. If anybody has any comments, of course, you can contact us on Twitter at Answers in Reason, or on Facebook, either on our Facebook page, Answers in Reason, or our Facebook group, Answers in Reason. You can leave a note in the comments on YouTube or Twitch or wherever you happen to be watching this video. I know we do multi-stream to a number of different locations, although we can only display the viewers on YouTube and Twitch right now. We are hoping to get that resolved so that we can display them from everywhere. Anyway, thank you very much, everybody, and thank you, Kevin, Chris, Martine, and Dave. It's been a pleasure chatting with you tonight. Hopefully, we'll get a chance to chat again, but if not, I hope you all have a wonderful Christmas, whatever you're doing. Even if you are stuck in a lockdown, I hope you and your family are all good.
Yeah, Merry Christmas.
Merry
for you too,
Christmas.
Antonio.
Yeah.
Merry Christmas, Buddha says hi.
So, you've been watching the Fresh Air Sci-Fi show. I'm Joe.
I'm Dave.
I'm Martijn.
I've actually had stuff to say for once. That was you.
You did indeed. We need to do another one. Awesome. Thank you very much for your attendance tonight, guys. Good night.
Good night, all.
Right.
Bye.
I can go like this.